Tonight, as you lie in the quiet darkness, as the day slowly loosens its grip upon you, I want you to notice the stillness gathering around your body. The room has grown softer. The world beyond these walls is no longer asking anything of you. The hours of effort are fading. The voices of obligation are becoming distant. Your breathing begins to slow of its own accord. Your body, which has carried the weight of the day, begins to surrender inch by inch to rest. And your mind, once occupied with plans, concerns, duties, and unfinished questions, begins to enter a gentler region, a softer threshold, a place where the rigid edges of waking thought begin to dissolve. This is the hour I love most, because this is the hour when man is nearest to the hidden workshop of creation. During the day, the senses clamor. The world presents its facts. Time appears stubborn. Circumstances seem solid. Desire feels like something out there, something ahead, something not yet touched. But at night, especially in this tender interval before sleep, another possibility opens. The outer world lowers its voice. The inner world draws nearer. And what you dare to accept in this softened state may enter more deeply than all the anxious reasoning of the day. So tonight, I will not ask you to wait for your desire. I will ask you to remember it, not as a hope, not as a dream, not as some distant promise floating somewhere in the future. I will ask you to remember it as something already complete, something that has passed through the doorway of fulfillment, something no longer approaching, no longer uncertain, no longer suspended before you as a possibility, but settled behind you like yesterday. This is a strange instruction to the ordinary mind, because the ordinary mind has been trained to desire by looking forward. It says, one day I will be free, one day I will receive, one day I will be loved, one day I will be secure, one day the answer will come. And there is a certain sweetness in that way of speaking, but there is also a hidden bondage. For every one day contains within it the quiet confession, not now. Every when it happens carries the shadow of it has not happened. Every longing projected into the future leaves the present self standing outside the door of fulfillment. And so men and women spend years desiring, not because desire itself is wrong, but because they have made a home in anticipation. They have become faithful servants of almost healed, almost chosen, almost provided for, almost delivered. They wake with the desire still ahead of them, and they fall asleep with the desire still ahead of them. They speak of it, think of it, imagine it, and yet always as something arriving, something delayed, something approaching but never possessed. Tonight, we shall leave that state behind. Tonight, you will not chase the desire down the road of time. You will not stretch your hand toward some distant tomorrow. You will not beg the future to be merciful. Instead, you will enter a far quieter, far more powerful feeling. You will assume that it already happened. You will let the desire lose the flavor of future and take on the calm familiarity of memory, because the desire changes when it no longer feels future, but familiar. Think for a moment of anything simple that occurred yesterday. Perhaps you drank a cup of water. Perhaps you heard a familiar voice. Perhaps you passed through a doorway. Perhaps you laid an object upon a table. Choose something small, something ordinary. Notice how it feels. You do not strain to believe it happened. You do not sit in anxiety wondering whether yesterday will finally arrive. You do not build faith around it. You do not affirm it nervously. You simply know it happened. It is done. It belongs to your experience. It has the quiet weight of completion. That feeling, that utterly undramatic sense of done, is worth more than 1,000 excited fantasies of the future. For what is truly yours does not always feel intense. Often it feels settled, natural, quiet, familiar, a thing that has already found its place in consciousness. This is the atmosphere I want you to enter tonight. Not urgency, not grasping, not the trembling hope that says maybe, but the peaceful recollection that says, yes, I remember, it happened. Let your breathing slow a little more as you hear this. Let the body take these words not as instruction from outside, but as permission from within. You are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to release the posture of one who is forever on the verge of receiving. You are allowed to rest in the state of one for whom the matter is no longer unresolved. Perhaps the desire you carry is for peace. Then tonight, do not imagine peace coming tomorrow. Remember the night peace finally became natural. Remember the moment when the tension broke and you realized the old fear no longer ruled you. Perhaps the desire is for love. Do not imagine love merely approaching. Remember when love had already entered your life and become familiar. Remember the first evening you felt no need to question whether you were chosen because you knew that you were. Perhaps the desire is for supply. Do not imagine help someday appearing. Remember the day the matter had already turned. Remember how different the room felt afterward. Remember the breath you took when you knew the burden was over. Perhaps the desire is for healing. Do not remain forever imagining the first sign of improvement. Remember being beyond it. Remember the body already restored to its natural ease. Remember the quiet gratitude that came when the old concern no longer occupied every thought. This is the power of assuming from the past. It removes the frantic edge of becoming. It stills the mind. It lets the inner man say, I am not reaching, I am recalling. And in that recall, the subconscious receives not a wish, but a fact, not a future, but an accomplished state, not a pleading, but a remembered reality. Tonight, I will not ask you to wait for your desire. I will ask you to remember it. Let that sentence settle deeply. It is the doorway to everything that follows. For memory, even when inwardly formed, carries a certainty that hope rarely touches. Hope may tremble. Desire may stretch forward. But memory rests. Memory does not chase. Memory does not panic. Memory does not ask, will it happen? It says, it did. Now I know the surface mind may object. It may say, but Neville, how can I remember what has not yet occurred in the world of sense? And I answer gently, because this is not an act of falsehood. It is an act of spiritual understanding. The outer world is always late to the truth of consciousness. The visible must follow the invisible. The fact in space must answer the assumption in being. What you accept inwardly as accomplished begins to gather around itself the conditions of its own appearance. And when the assumption carries the calm finality of memory, it becomes easier to rest in than a desire still held in the tense posture of waiting. For tonight, you need not solve the mystery fully. You need only become willing to feel differently, willing to release the future tense, willing to stop calling your fulfillment coming, willing to imagine what it would be like if it had happened yesterday, if the answer were already behind you, if the turning point had already taken place, if the thing you once longed for had already crossed from possibility into experience. How would your body lie here then? How would your breath move? Would the forehead be softer? Would the chest be less guarded? Would there be less pressure in the mind to seek, to ask, to check? Yes, there would be a quietness, a settled softness. The nervous system would begin to understand that the wait is over. And I ask you now, gently, to taste that quietness. Do not force it. Let it appear as a subtle change, perhaps just a deeper exhale, perhaps just the sense that the night has become kinder, perhaps just the beginning of a thought. What if I no longer had to wait? What if tonight is not another night of longing, but the first night of recollection? What if the desire is not standing ahead of you, but already glowing behind you, like a lamp in a room you have just left? What if the prayer has already been answered in consciousness, and all that remains is to remember it faithfully enough that the world of sense must take its cue? This is where we begin, not in urgency, not in effort, not in the anxious pursuit of tomorrow. We begin in the strange and sacred calm of something already done. You are lying here tonight, not to chase fulfillment, but to enter the memory of fulfillment, not to ask, will it come, but to allow the deeper mind to say, I remember when it came. Not to hold the desire in front of you like a distant star, but to bring it near, intimate, familiar, settled, like yesterday. The desire changes when it no longer feels future, but familiar. Let that be the mood of this night. Let it accompany you as the body grows heavier and the mind becomes more receptive. Let the outer world recede. Let time loosen. Let waiting lose its throne. You are not here to postpone your good. You are not here to adore delay. You are here to assume completion in the gentlest, most convincing form available to consciousness, the quiet certainty of remembered experience. Tonight, I will not ask you to wait for your desire. I will ask you to remember it. There is a subtle error that has kept many sincere men and women wandering in circles. Though they believed they were moving toward fulfillment, it is not always obvious. It often wears the face of hope. It sounds positive. It seems harmless. And yet it quietly preserves the very state one longs to escape. It is the habit of placing desire in the future. One day I will have it. Someday I will be free. Soon it will happen. Eventually it will come. How gentle those sentences appear. How full of promise. How much better they seem than despair. And yet, if you listen beneath the surface, you will hear what consciousness is truly confessing. One day I will have it means I do not have it now. Someday I will be free means I am not free now. Soon it will happen means it has not happened. Eventually it will come means it is still absent. And consciousness does not create from the words you decorate with hope. Consciousness creates from the state you occupy while speaking them. If the state is still waiting, then waiting is what you continue to experience. If the state is still lack, then lack is what remains alive beneath every hopeful phrase. If fulfillment is always ahead of you, then ahead of you it stays. The future is often the most polished prison of desire. It is polished because it does not feel like defeat. It feels noble. It feels patient. It feels as though you are keeping faith. But if your inner posture remains that of one who is still not there, one who is still not chosen, still not supplied, still not healed, still not delivered, then you are not living in faith. You are living in postponement. And postponement repeated becomes a state. The state repeated becomes identity. The identity assumed becomes experience. Many people imagine they are being spiritual when they say, I know it will come in the right time. Sometimes those words are spoken from peace, but often they are spoken from delay. They are a soft way of making peace with absence. They are a way of saying, I cannot accept it now, so I shall push it into a gentler tomorrow. But the law does not ask you to place your goods somewhere far ahead. It asks you to accept the state of fulfillment now. Not necessarily to see the outer evidence at once, but to occupy the inward fact now. To live in soon is still to live in not yet. Understand this with great care. I do not say that events in the visible world never unfold through sequence. I do not say that the bridge of incidents has no movement. I say that inwardly you must cease to be the person who waits. You must no longer identify with the self who stands before fulfillment as though it were perpetually on its way. You must become within yourself the one for whom the desire has already crossed the threshold. That is the difference between desire as future and desire as already experienced. Desire as future keeps the state of waiting alive. Desire as already experienced creates inward completion. One keeps you reaching. The other lets you rest. One keeps you asking, when? The other allows you to say, I remember. One keeps your imagination turned toward the horizon. The other brings you into the warmth of a house already entered. What you keep calling coming never becomes done in consciousness. Pause and feel the weight of that. You may speak of your desire lovingly every day, but if you always call it coming, then you have never let it arrive within. You have rehearsed approach, not possession. You have practiced anticipation, not completion. You have imagined the road again and again, but not the arrival beyond the road. And because the subconscious faithfully takes your accepted state as instruction, it keeps producing the emotional and experiential conditions of approach. This is why some people remain in a perpetual season of signs, almosts, hints, maybe soon. Something is shifting. I feel it is near. Near is not here. Near still places the desire beyond possession. Near can become another form of distance. A man can spend years saying, it is close, while never assuming, it is mine. A woman can spend years saying, I feel it coming, while never entering. I remember when it came. The tone may be hopeful, but the position is still outside. A desire kept in the future keeps you loyal to absence. That loyalty is often unconscious. You do not intend to honor lack. You intend to move beyond it. But every time you inwardly say, when it happens, you are setting yourself before an unopened door. Every time you say, I am waiting for the answer, you become the waiting one. Every time you say, I hope it arrives soon, you strengthen the identity of one who has not yet received. And identity is more powerful than isolated desire. The world must reflect not merely what you want, but what you are conscious of being. If you are conscious of being the one who is waiting, circumstances will organize themselves to justify that consciousness. Delays will appear. Mixed signals will appear. Half-open doors will appear. Encouraging beginnings without settlement will appear. Not because the world is hostile, but because the state has not changed. The mirror has not been given a new face to reflect. This is why I tell you that one of the most merciful shifts a person can make is to stop speaking inwardly in the future tense. Not by forcing himself into empty declarations, but by understanding the hidden effect of language upon state. Language is not always the cause, but it reveals and reinforces the cause. If you habitually speak of your good as tomorrow's event, you remain inwardly tomorrow's person. You do not inhabit it, you anticipate it. There is a world of difference. Consider a man who desires financial ease. He says, "Soon I will be secure." At first that sounds hopeful, but the state beneath it may be, "I am insecure now." He scans for evidence. He calculates from fear. He imagines relief approaching, but not already possessed. Contrast him with the one who in the quiet of night assumes, "I remember when that burden lifted. I remember how ordinary peace felt afterward." The second man is no longer trying to reach security. He has entered the state of one who has known it. The difference is inward, but the outward world must eventually reveal it. Consider a woman who desires reconciliation. She says, "One day we will speak again." Perhaps she means well, but inwardly she may continue to occupy separation. Her imagination keeps the conversation ahead of her, still pending, still absent. But if she enters a nightly scene in which she remembers the reconciliation as already complete, remembers the calm afterward, remembers how normal the restored bond became, she ceases to be the abandoned self looking forward. She becomes the reconciled self looking back. That is a different state entirely. Or consider one who longs for healing. He says, "Eventually, I will get better." The sentence appears courageous, but consciousness may hear, "I am still the one who is unwell." If he instead assumes the memory of restored ease, if he feels inwardly, "I remember when I began living freely again. I remember the morning I realized the old concern no longer ruled my mind," then he enters the state of health, not as a distant hope, but as a completed fact in consciousness. You see, the issue is not the literal word future. The issue is the position of the self. Are you standing before your desire, or are you standing beyond it? Are you asking life to carry you toward it, or are you occupying the state of one who has already passed through it? Are you saying, "It will be," from the old identity, or are you resting in, "It has been," from the new? There are those who think it is safer to keep desire in the future. They fear disappointment. They believe if they only say, "Maybe someday," they will not feel the risk of assuming too boldly. But this caution has a price. It preserves the very distance they fear. The more cautiously they postpone inner acceptance, the more faithfully the world reflects postponement. They do not suffer because desire failed them. They suffer because they have not allowed desire to become present in consciousness. Now I ask you gently tonight, as the body grows quieter and the mind softens, notice where you have been using the future as a hiding place. Where have you been saying, "One day"? Where have you been allowing "soon" to comfort you while secretly keeping the door unopened within? Where have you been calling something "on its way" because you have not yet dared to call it done? Do not condemn yourself, simply see it. Seeing the state clearly is the beginning of leaving it. You are not required to maintain the posture of waiting. You may relinquish it tonight. You may stop treating fulfillment as an event that only belongs to some later hour. You may begin to give it the inward atmosphere of something already accomplished. You may let desire move from future promise to remembered fact. Not with strain, not with desperate repetition, not by trying to deceive yourself, but by accepting that the self who waits and the self who remembers are two entirely different states, and you are free to leave one for the other. The future is often the most polished prison of desire. Do not sleep in that prison tonight. What you keep calling coming never becomes done in consciousness. Let it become done within you. To live in soon is still to live in not yet. Leave soon behind. A desire kept in the future keeps you loyal to absence. Tonight, withdraw that loyalty. Instead, let the inward word change. Not "it will happen," but "I remember when it happened." Not "I hope the answer comes," but "I remember the relief after the answer came." Not "someday I will be free," but "I remember how freedom began to feel natural." Not "eventually I will have it," but "it has already found its place in my experience." Feel how the body responds when the sentence changes. The future tense may tighten the chest with anticipation. The remembered tense may soften it with completion. The future tense may make the mind lean forward. The remembered tense allows it to settle back. The future tense may keep you vigilant. The remembered tense permits rest. And because this is a teaching for the night, this distinction matters greatly. The last state carried into sleep is not a small matter. If you fall asleep longing toward tomorrow, you carry the state of tomorrow's person into the subconscious. But if you fall asleep remembering fulfillment as already lived, you carry the state of completion. One plants waiting, the other plants possession. One asks the night to continue delay, the other asks the night to deepen acceptance. So tonight, stop postponing inwardly. Let the desire no longer hover ahead of you as though it belonged to another day. Bring it into the sacred past of consciousness. Let it feel familiar. Let it feel known. Let it feel no longer absent. Let it feel like something your soul has already passed through. You are not being asked to deny the senses. You are being asked to stop letting the senses define the tense of your desire. The senses may say, not yet, but imagination can say, I remember. And imagination is the true creative power. The senses report what has hardened. Imagination selects what shall harden next. Therefore, choose wisely tonight. Do not sleep as the one who is almost there. Do not sleep as the one who hopes soon. Do not sleep as the one who is still approaching. Sleep as the one who remembers. Sleep as the one for whom the matter is already behind him. Sleep as the one who has ceased to postpone his own good in consciousness. And as you rest in that state, something within begins to change. The desire is no longer a distant light. It becomes part of your inner history. And what consciousness accepts as its history, the world must begin to justify in form. Now I want you to notice something so simple that the waking mind usually passes over it without realizing its importance. Think of something ordinary that took place yesterday, not a great event, not something dramatic. Choose something small, almost forgettable. Perhaps you had a brief conversation with someone. Perhaps you drank a cup of tea. Perhaps you walked a short distance from one room to another, or along a familiar street. Perhaps you opened a door. Perhaps you read a letter, folded it, and placed it aside. Choose one small memory now. Let it rise gently. Do not strain to see it. Do not force the details. Simply let yourself remember. Perhaps you can recall the sound of the voice in that conversation. Perhaps the warmth of the cup in your hand. Perhaps the movement of your own footsteps. Perhaps the turning of the door handle. Perhaps the texture of the paper as you opened the letter. These details may appear faintly or clearly. It does not matter. What matters is not the picture alone. What matters is the feeling that accompanies it. Notice how this memory feels. You do not have to believe it happened. You do not have to convince yourself that it was real. You do not have to repeat a phrase about it in order to maintain its truth. You do not feel anxious that yesterday may fail to arrive. You do not check the room for evidence that the cup of tea was actually drunk or that the door was truly opened. You do not search for proof. You simply know. It happened. It belongs to your experience. It has already passed through the gate of occurrence. It is settled. A true memory does not beg to be believed. Let that sentence sink into you. A true memory does not plead for acceptance. It does not tremble before uncertainty. It does not ask the mind to support it with effort. It rests within you with a quiet dignity. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not constantly insisting upon it. It simply is. And because it is, you feel no need to force emotion around it. You may feel little or nothing at all, and yet you do not conclude that the memory is false. The fact of it does not depend upon emotional intensity. This is very important. Many men and women think that if they are to assume fulfillment, they must produce some magnificent ecstasy. They believe they must feel overwhelming excitement, perhaps tears, perhaps a rush through the body, perhaps a spiritual thunderclap. But think again of yesterday. Did you feel ecstasy when you remembered opening a door? Did you need intensity to know you had read a letter? Did you require emotional fire to accept that you had spoken to someone? No. The memory is real because it is settled, not because it is dramatic. What has happened rests quietly in you, and that quietness is the secret. A memory possesses a particular calm weight. It has already crossed from possibility into fact. Therefore, it no longer leans forward. It no longer asks for permission. It no longer lives on the edge of becoming. It rests. It belongs. It has found its place in the inner world. It is completed, ordinary, unargued, effortless. Yesterday does not tremble. Yesterday does not say, what if I did not happen? Yesterday does not ask, when will I arrive? Yesterday does not worry whether circumstances will allow it. Yesterday is finished. It is known. It remains untouched by uncertainty. And I tell you, the fulfilled desire must take on the same calm weight, not the fever of waiting, not the restlessness of anticipation, not the unstable excitement of something that may or may not appear. The desire must begin to feel like that simple memory of yesterday, quietly real, already accepted, no longer requiring belief as a labor, because in consciousness it has become known. Let us look at this more deeply. The difference between a desire and a memory is not merely one of time, it is one of relationship. Desire, when held in the future, has distance. It pulls on you. It seems to stand across a field, and you reach for it. A memory does not stand across a field. It is already within you. You carry it. It belongs to your inner possession. You do not chase it. You recollect it. You do not ask whether it will come. You allow it to be present because it has already been absorbed into your being. That is the shift I want to teach you tonight. Not to strain harder toward what you want, but to let it lose the quality of distance. Let it begin to feel inwardly possessed, as memory is possessed. Let it be not an object you are trying to grasp, but an event you can quietly revisit. The difference may appear subtle to reason, but it is vast in consciousness. A desire held as future says, I am not there. A memory says, I have been there. A desire held as future says, I wait. A memory says, I know. A desire held as future says, perhaps. A memory says, it happened. And consciousness, being the only creative reality, responds not to the surface words alone, but to this deeper posture. It responds to whether you are waiting or remembering, pursuing or possessing, longing or recollecting. Now return again to that simple memory from yesterday. Perhaps it was a conversation. Notice that even if you cannot remember every word, you still know it happened. Perhaps it was a cup of tea. Even if the precise taste has faded, the fact remains. Perhaps it was a short walk. Even if you cannot recall every step, you do not question whether you moved. Perhaps you opened a door. Even if the room is now silent and still, the memory remains true. Perhaps you read a letter. Even if it is no longer in your hand, the experience is yours. See how little effort this requires. No forcing, no strain, no anxious construction. The fact is inwardly, that is all. The fulfilled desire must take on the same calm weight. If your desire is for peace, do not work to produce an intense spiritual mood. Instead, ask gently, what would peace feel like if it had already become part of my life yesterday? Perhaps not a shout of triumph, but a softer morning, a quieter body, the absence of an old burden, the memory of realizing, I have not been afraid today. Let that feel simple. Let it feel lived. If your desire is for love, do not always imagine the first moment of being chosen with overwhelming drama. Consider instead the memory of an ordinary evening after love has become established. Perhaps you remember sitting quietly, feeling no need to question where you stand. Perhaps you remember hearing a familiar voice and feeling at home. There is no desperation in this, there is completion. If your desire is for supply, do not only picture the instant of rescue. Remember the day after relief arrived. Remember how naturally you moved through the house. Remember how the old pressure seemed strangely distant. Remember perhaps reading something at the table and realizing that the burden which once occupied the whole mind no longer held the same power. That memory is not frantic, it is settled. If your desire is for healing, imagine not the struggle toward recovery, but the memory of a day when the body moved with ease, and you almost forgot there had ever been concern. How ordinary wholeness felt, how natural, how quietly complete. The mind may at first find this unusual. It is accustomed to working, reaching, anticipating. It thinks a desire must be felt as desire, or else nothing is being done. But I tell you, there is a higher operation than desire. It is assumption. And the assumption is strongest when the desired state carries the feeling of reality. Nothing feels more naturally real to the mind than memory. So you borrow the calm authority of memory. You let fulfillment wear the texture of something already experienced. This does not mean you deceive yourself. It means you educate consciousness into the feeling of completion. The senses may still report the old world, but you are not confined to the old report. You are learning to take your stand in a deeper fact, one not yet seen, but inwardly accepted. And because imagination is the creative fact, the visible world must, in due course, reveal what consciousness has already received. A true memory does not beg to be believed, so do not make your fulfilled desire beg. What has happened rests quietly in you, so let your fulfilled desire rest quietly as well. Yesterday does not tremble, so let your accepted end lose its trembling. The fulfilled desire must take on the same calm weight. Let us remain with this a little longer, because the mind learns through repetition of understanding. Most people approach imagination with too much strain. They create scenes and then inspect them. They wonder whether they were vivid enough, whether they felt enough, whether they repeated enough. They turn the inner act into another task of labor. But a memory is not labored over in this way. You remember simply, sometimes vividly, sometimes faintly, yet you do not doubt the reality of the event, because its truth does not depend upon how bright the picture appears. Its truth lies in the certainty that it belongs to you. So when you practice this tonight, do not judge yourself by visual brilliance. You may recall the desired fulfillment with only a soft outline. That is enough if the inward tone is one of completion. Perhaps you hear one simple sentence in memory. Perhaps you feel one small bodily release. Perhaps you know, without much imagery at all, yes, that was the day it changed. Let that be enough. A memory need not be theatrical to be true. Suppose you remember yesterday's conversation. You may not reconstruct every gesture of the other person. You may not see the room perfectly, yet the memory remains. Likewise, when you remember the fulfilled desire, do not clutter it with unnecessary detail. Let it breathe. Let it arise naturally. Let one fragment carry the whole fact. A room can be remembered by the light through a window, a journey by the weight of a suitcase once held, a victory by one sentence spoken afterward, a healed life by one ordinary movement of the body, a restored relationship by one quiet look shared, a fulfilled desire by one inward sigh that says, yes, that happened. This quiet recognition is more important than spectacle. The desire must be relieved of its theatrical burden. It does not need to arrive in consciousness like a parade. It needs to be accepted like a fact. It needs to settle into you the way yesterday has settled into you. If it remains too dramatic, you may unconsciously keep it at a distance, because dramatic things feel rare, exceptional, almost unbelievable. But what is familiar is easily possessed. What is ordinary is easily accepted. Therefore, let fulfillment become ordinary in imagination. Let it take its place among the known experiences of your inner life. There is a sacred humility in this. You are not trying to impress yourself with a grand vision. You are teaching the deeper mind a simple, it happened, it is done, I remember. You are moving from the strained posture of one who desires toward the peaceful posture of one who recollects. And in that movement, doubt loses some of its ground, for doubt feeds on uncertainty, and memory is not uncertain. Memory has no need to ask for signs. Memory has no need to ask for signs. Memory has no need to check the outer world. Memory has no fear that yesterday may fail to manifest. This is why the state of the hour before sleep is delicate. If you carry longing into it, longing may deepen. If you carry anxiety, anxiety may root itself. But if you carry the calm of memory, the subconscious receives completion. It receives finality. It receives a state that does not ask for proof, because it feels as though proof has already been lived through. Now let your chosen simple memory of yesterday fade gently, while you keep the feeling of it, not the content, but the quality. Unargued, effortless. Hold that quality lightly. Let it hover within you like a soft atmosphere. This is the emotional texture you are going to bring to the fulfilled desire. You need not do it yet with force. For now, simply recognize the state. Recognize how different it is from waiting. Recognize how quiet it is. Recognize how free it is from strain. Recognize that the most convincing state is not always the loudest, but often the most peaceful. You have no Every memory has trained you in it. You know how to feel that something has happened. You know how to rest in a completed experience. You know how to regard a fact without pleading for belief. Tonight, you will begin to apply that very capacity to your desired end. The desire need not remain a distant star. It can become an inward recollection. It can be felt with the same quietness as yesterday. And when that happens, you have changed your relationship to it. You are no longer merely wishing. You are assuming from completion. You are not trying to believe. You are remembering. So breathe softly. Let the room remain still. Let the body rest. And hold gently this one realization. What has already happened does not need belief. It only needs remembrance. And the fulfilled desire, accepted in consciousness, must begin to carry that same serene and undisturbed weight. Now we come to the heart of it, the quiet turn that changes the entire relationship between you and your. Most men hope for what they want. They picture it coming. They wish it would happen. They say, perhaps with sincerity, perhaps with great emotion, I believe it will come. I believe it is on its way. I believe one day I shall have it. And yet, in all of this, the desire remains ahead of them. It remains something approached, something awaited, something standing at a distance. Hope reaches forward. Memory rests behind. That is the difference. Hope extends the hand into the future. Memory gathers the thing inwardly as already known. Hope stands before the door and wonders when it may open. Memory remembers the day you walked through it. Hope looks out across time. Memory sits quietly within completion. Hope still contains the possibility of delay. Memory carries the authority of something done. So tonight, I do not want you merely to say, I believe it will happen. That sentence may be beautiful, but it still speaks from before. It still places fulfillment beyond the present state. I want you to move into another atmosphere altogether. I want you to feel, I remember when it happened. I want you to let the desire descend from the heavens of possibility into the quiet chamber of recollection. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember how natural it became. These are not empty words. They are a change of position. They move consciousness from anticipation to completion. They take the desire out of the category of things that may one day arrive and place it among the experiences already accepted inwardly as fact. And when desire is carried in this manner, it no longer agitates the mind in the same way. It no longer keeps calling you forward with a cry of absence. It begins to rest within you. It becomes less hungry, less distant, less theatrical, more intimate, more settled, more yours. The mind that remembers no longer chases. This is why memory is so powerful. A remembered thing does not flee from you. You do not have to pursue it. You do not awaken at dawn saying, will yesterday finally happen today? You are not anxious that the past may fail to arrive. It belongs to you, and because it belongs to you, you can hold it lightly. That lightness is not indifference, it is possession. It is the ease that arises when a thing has already crossed from longing into experience. Now let us look carefully at the difference between visualizing it coming and remembering it as complete. If you imagine money arriving, you may feel a thrill of anticipation. You may see the sum appear, hear the news, feel excitement, but beneath the scene may still lie the subtle state of arrival not yet accomplished. You are standing at the moment of change, which means consciousness may still identify with the self who was previously without. You are on the edge of receiving, not settled in having. But if you remember the matter as already resolved, everything changes. You are no longer at the threshold. You are beyond it. Perhaps you remember sitting quietly a week after the burden had lifted. Perhaps you remember telling someone, it worked out more naturally than I expected. Perhaps you remember how strange it felt that what once troubled you had become ordinary. That memory has a different gravity. It is not the energy of almost. It is the atmosphere of after. The desire becomes powerful when it loses the flavor of anticipation. Anticipation can be intoxicating, but it is unstable. It keeps the body alert, the mind leaning forward, the spirit slightly unsettled. It whispers, something is about to happen. But as long as something is about to happen, you are not yet living from the fact that it has. Memory removes that leaning. Memory lets the body sit back. Memory no longer needs to ask, how close is it? Memory says, it has already found its place in my world. Think of a letter you once waited for. Before it came, perhaps you watched for it. You listened for footsteps. You wondered each day whether it would arrive. The waiting became a state. The letter seemed to possess power over your mood. But after it came, after you opened it, read it, and knew the answer, everything changed. The same letter no longer stood over you as a possibility. It became part of your history. Even if you preserved it carefully, it did not trouble you. It rested in fact. Now take that very quality and apply it inwardly to your desire. Do not stand before the door waiting. Remember the day you walked through it. Do not stand before the letter longing. Remember the day you read it. Do not stand before the answer trembling. Remember the day you received it. Do not remain in the first movement of becoming. Enter the completed rhythm of already. This is not a small correction. It is a complete reversal of the direction of thought. The ordinary mind turns forward and says, how will I get there? The awakened imagination stands beyond the desired event and says, I remember when I arrived. The ordinary mind wonders, will it happen? The inwardly instructed mind recollects, it happened, and life has continued from that point. The ordinary mind hopes, the awakened mind remembers. Hope reaches forward, memory rests behind. Let that contrast remain with you. Hope may be sincere, hope may even feel noble, but hope still belongs to the self that has not entered. It waits before the feast. Memory has already eaten and recalls the taste. Hope is outside the house, memory is seated within. Hope imagines the bridge beginning. Memory looks back over the bridge already crossed. These are not identical states, and because states create, the distinction matters. If you would manifest a loving relationship, do not only imagine someone arriving, do not remain forever at the moment of first contact, first message, first declaration. Those moments still belong to transition. Instead, remember a later evening, when love had become familiar. Remember the peace of no longer asking whether you are chosen. Remember hearing a tender word and receiving it naturally. Remember the ease of being secure. Say inwardly, I remember when love stopped feeling far away. I remember how natural it became. If you would manifest freedom from an old burden, do not only imagine the instant of deliverance. Remember the days after. Remember waking without the old pressure. Remember passing through the room where you once worried and noticing that your body remained calm. Remember saying almost with wonder, I had forgotten how heavy that used to feel. This is the felt fact of completion. If you desire a change in work, position, recognition, or livelihood, do not only imagine the invitation or the offer. Remember being settled into the new place. Remember the ordinary rhythm of your days after the change. Remember how you stopped feeling like an outsider to your own success. Remember thinking, this is simply what I do now. The desire becomes stronger when it becomes normal. It becomes normal when it is remembered from beyond the arrival. If you desire healing, do not merely picture the first sign of improvement. Remember being well enough that wellness had become unremarkable. Remember moving freely without monitoring every sensation. Remember the gratitude that came after the fear had faded. Remember how natural the body felt once more. That memory carries the serene authority of a state already lived. Again and again, the question is not, can I hope strongly enough? The question is, can I remember gently enough? Not, can I force belief, but can I assume the tone of recollection? Not, can I convince myself that it will happen, but can I enter the inner posture of one who knows it happened? The mind that remembers no longer chases. And because it no longer chases, it no longer advertises absence so fiercely. Chasing declares distance. Chasing implies that fulfillment has not yet joined you. Chasing keeps your attention fixed upon the gap, but remembering closes the gap inwardly. It removes the distance of longing. It lets you carry the fulfilled desire within as something no longer requiring pursuit. There is a deep peace in this. Many have fatigued themselves trying to believe in what they still held as future. They repeated words while the heart stretched forward. They visualized while the body remained tense with anticipation. They said, it is coming, yet secretly feared it might not. But the phrase, it is coming, can never have the settled finality of I remember when it came. One speaks from approach, the other from attainment. Tonight, let attainment become your inward home. Not as pride, not as fantasy, as assumption, as the deliberate adoption of the state that would be yours if the matter had already become part of your life and had rested there long enough to feel familiar. This is how the desire loses its fever. This is how the nervous system begins to calm. This is how the mind ceases to ask for signs every hour. For signs are sought by the one who still waits. The one who remembers does not search with the same hunger. He may notice movement, certainly. He may receive the unfolding with gratitude. But inwardly, he is no longer a beggar at the gates of time. Do not stand before the door waiting. Remember the day you walked through it. Let us make that very plain. If there is a door in your life that has seemed closed, perhaps the door of reconciliation, the door of prosperity, the door of opportunity, the door of restoration, do not imagine yourself forever standing outside, hand hovering before the handle, wondering whether it will open. Go beyond that moment. Remember standing on the other side. Remember the room within. Remember how the air felt once you had entered. Remember how foolish the old waiting seemed after the fact. The door does not remain closed in memory. Memory begins after the opening, and that is where your consciousness should dwell. Perhaps you remember saying, I cannot believe I worried so much. Perhaps you remember laughing softly at how inevitable it all appeared afterward. Perhaps you remember the person beside you, the letter in your hand, the quiet of a peaceful afternoon, the ordinary fact that life had changed. Let that memory be gentle. Let it be close. Let it be yours. The desire becomes powerful when it loses the flavor of anticipation. Anticipation says, I hope. Memory says, I know. Anticipation says, soon. Memory says, already. Anticipation says, perhaps. Memory says, Memory turns inward and rests. Which state feels more secure? Which state feels more complete? Which state impresses the subconscious with greater finality? The answer is evident. Now, I do not ask you to banish hope with hostility. Hope has served many as a bridge from despair. But tonight we are going beyond hope. We are not merely lifting the eyes from sorrow toward possibility. We are assuming the end. We are giving the desire the full dignity of completion. Hope is a dawn. Memory is the clear daylight of inward fact. Hope says, there may be a way. Memory says, the way was found. Hope says, I believe this can happen. Memory says, I remember when it did. That is the central secret. Do not hope for it. Remember it. Feel the difference not only in thought, but in the body. When you say, I hope it will happen, do you lean forward inwardly? Is there a subtle weighting in the chest? Is there a reaching in the mind? Now say gently, I remember when it happened. Notice whether something settles, whether the breath slows, whether the body receives a small measure of peace. That settling is precious. It means you have begun to alter the state. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember how natural it became. Let these phrases unfold with no strain. They are not formulas to command the universe. They are pathways into a state. Each one helps consciousness step out of becoming and into having been fulfilled. Each one invites the subconscious to accept completion. Each one withdraws attention from delay and gives it to accomplished experience. Suppose your desire feels enormous. Suppose the mind says, this cannot be remembered. It is too far from present facts. Then do not begin with grandeur. Begin with the feeling after. Ask, if this had happened yesterday, how would I lie here tonight? Would there be more ease? Would there be a softer gaze behind closed eyes? Would there be less argument with the future? Begin there. Memory need not be elaborate. It must be emotionally believable. If a simple inward sigh can carry the sense of completion, let that be your memory. And remember, the goal is not to construct a perfectly detailed inner history. The goal is to shift allegiance. You are leaving the state of waiting and entering the state of recollection. You are no longer devoted to the phrase, it is coming. You are devoted to the feeling, it came. You are no longer walking behind your desire like a distant pilgrim. You are sitting beside it as one who has known it. This will transform the way you sleep. If you fall asleep hoping, the night receives a state of expectancy mixed with absence. If you fall asleep remembering, the night receives completion. If you fall asleep saying soon, the subconscious receives delay softened by optimism. If you fall asleep saying, I remember, the subconscious receives a settled fact. And from that settled fact, the bridge of incidents begins, continues, and unfolds according to law. So let this be the great turn of tonight. Do not stand before the door waiting. Remember the day you walked through it. Do not look toward fulfillment like a traveler still far from home. Remember the evening you sat inside that home and knew the journey was complete. Do not keep saying, I believe it will happen. Feel instead, I remember when it happened. Do not cling to anticipation. Let desire ripen into recollection. The mind that remembers no longer chases, and when the mind ceases to chase, the soul becomes quiet enough to accept. When the soul accepts, consciousness is impressed. When consciousness is impressed, the outer world must, in its own perfect movement, conform. So tonight, as you move towards sleep, carry not the restless ache of hoping, but the calm authority of memory. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember how natural it became. Now I must take you deeper, because if you are to assume that your desire has already happened, you must understand that you are not inventing a lie. You are not creating fantasy from emptiness. You are not pretending in the childish sense of the word. You are entering a state that already exists. Creation is finished, and consciousness enters what it is willing to accept. This is one of the most freeing truths I have ever discovered. Men imagine that life is being made little by little from nothing, that possibilities lie unborn somewhere ahead, waiting for time to manufacture them. They say, perhaps one day this may exist. Perhaps one day this can be mine. But I tell you, all states already are. Every state of being, every condition of life, every version of man's experience exists now in the deeper reality of consciousness. Poverty is a state, wealth is a state, rejection is a state, chosen love is a state, illness is a state, wholeness is a state, delay is a state, fulfillment is a state. And man moves among states by assumption. He does not create a state from nothing, he enters, and what he occupies inwardly must, in due season, externalize itself in the world he calls fact. You do not invent fulfillment, you awaken to it. Let that phrase free you from the fear that you are somehow deceiving yourself when you remember your desire as complete. You are not creating falsehood. You are becoming aware of a reality that your senses have not yet reported. The senses are slow. They reveal only what has hardened into form. They are faithful, but they are late. They show you the harvest after the seed has already been accepted. They show you the outer fact after the inner assumption has already done its secret work. The outer world is always late to the truth of imagination. This is why I tell you never to make the visible world your highest authority. If the visible world were first, imagination would be powerless. But imagination is first, consciousness is first, assumption is first, the world follows. So when you inwardly remember a fulfilled desire, you are not trying to force unreality upon reality. You are choosing the reality from which the visible world must eventually take form. The unseen is not unreal, it is only unseen. A seed beneath the earth is unseen, yet it is not unreal. The child in the womb is unseen, yet it is not unreal. Dawn before the first line of light appears on the horizon is unseen, yet it is not unreal. It is only the absence of manifestation to the senses. So when I say that all states exist, I mean that the fulfilled state you desire is already present in the infinite realm of consciousness, awaiting your entrance. You do not summon it from nowhere. You step into it, you consent to it, you let it become the reality of self. And then, because life has no choice but to reflect consciousness, the world begins to assume its corresponding shape. Consider how often men speak as though their present state were permanent, because it is visible. A man sees lack and says, "This is my life." But lack is only a state he has entered and persisted in. Another sees rejection and says, "This is who I am." But rejection is only a state he has occupied and mistaken for identity. Another sees delay and says, "This is the nature of reality." But delay is only a state that has been accepted, rehearsed, and therefore expressed. None of these states are eternal. They are not laws. They are garments. And every garment may be laid aside. The fulfilled state exists just as surely as the unfulfilled one. The state of answered prayer exists. The state of restored harmony exists. The state of wealth exists. The state of peace exists. The state of being loved exists. The state of the matter already resolved exists. Your task is not to create that state. Your task is to enter it inwardly and remain faithful to it until the outer world catches up. This is why the method of remembering is so powerful. When you remember your desire as though it already happened, you are not manufacturing a fiction. You are adopting the consciousness of the fulfilled state. You are saying inwardly, "I stand here now. I am no longer waiting outside this reality. I have entered it. I remember from within it." The memory is not the cause in isolation. The state is the cause. The memory helps you enter the state. It trains the mind to stop wandering before the door and to live within the house. Suppose a man longs for abundance. If he says, "I hope money comes," he stands outside the state of provision. If he imagines receiving money dramatically again and again, he may still remain at the threshold, forever in the moment of transition. But if he enters a quiet inward memory, "I remember when the burden lifted. I remember how ordinary peace became after that. I remember realizing that I no longer feared the post," he has moved into another state. He is no longer creating wealth from nothing. He is entering the state of the man for whom supply has already become part of life. Or take one who longs for love. She does not invent a beloved out of emptiness. She enters the state of being loved, chosen, accompanied. She may remember inwardly, "I remember when my heart stopped bracing. I remember the calm of being secure. I remember how natural affection became." In that act, she is not lying. She is occupying a state of consciousness already available in the infinite field of being. And as she remains in it, her world must reorganize around that state. A man who desires healing does not manufacture wholeness by force. Wholeness exists as a state. He enters it by feeling himself inwardly restored, by remembering, I remember when the fear, I remember moving freely again. I remember how strange it felt that peace had returned to the body. The body of outer fact may still be reporting yesterday's state, but consciousness has begun to move elsewhere, and the visible world being effect must eventually mirror the new occupancy. You do not invent fulfillment, you awaken to it. There is great solemnity in this. It means your imaginal act is not childish play. It is a spiritual movement. It is the deliberate. When I teach that imagining creates reality, I do not mean that idle fantasy becomes fact merely because one daydreams. I mean that what you inwardly accept as true of yourself, what you consent to as present reality, what you embody in feeling, is creative. It is the selection of a state, and every state contains its own world. A state is not an isolated emotion, it is a whole structure of being. It includes thoughts, feelings, expectations, perceptions, actions, relationships, and consequences. When you enter the state of fulfillment, you do not need to manipulate all these separately. They are contained within the state itself. The seed carries the tree. The state carries its world. Therefore, when you assume the fulfilled state, you have chosen not only the end, but the whole bridge that leads to its appearance. This is why the conscious mind need not construct every detail of how. It does not know enough. It sees only the narrow path before it. The deeper imagination knows the complete arrangement. It knows which person must be moved, which opportunity must arise, which conversation must occur, which door must close, which door must open. All of that belongs to the state. When you enter it, you enter a whole order of events, though you do not yet see them. Creation is finished, and consciousness enters what it is willing to accept. That means the path is already implied in the end. The means are hidden in the state. The bridge is included within the destination. Your work is not to design the bridge, but to occupy the end so thoroughly that the bridge is compelled to reveal itself in sequence. Now let us speak carefully of the phrase, remembering the future. Some may hear it and think it is merely a clever mental trick, but it is not a trick. It is a way of overcoming the illusion of linear separation. What you call future is often simply the fulfilled state you have not yet accepted. To remember it is to withdraw your allegiance from time as a tyrant and give your loyalty to imagination as cause. You are not traveling into something unreal. You are touching a reality not yet visible through the senses. The unseen is not unreal, it is only unseen. There are realms the senses cannot yet confirm, but consciousness may enter them. When you close your eyes and feel yourself already loved, already supplied, already free, the outer world may still deny it. But denial from the senses does not cancel inward truth. It only tells you what has not yet hardened. The senses can report the previous harvest. They cannot prevent the new seed from growing. Therefore, do not bow before them. The outer world is always late to the truth of imagination. It lags behind. It echoes. It shows the old occupancy before the new one externalizes. If you wait for the world to prove the state before you enter it, you will remain a servant of effects. But if you enter the state first, you become the operant power. You live from cause, not from reaction. Imagine a great mansion with many. One room is marked fear, another poverty, another illness, another rejection, another peace, another wealth, another love fulfilled, another the matter already resolved. These rooms all exist within the infinite house of consciousness. A man wanders into one room and finding himself surrounded by its furnishings, declares, "This is reality." But he has mistaken a room for the whole house. He remains there because he believes there is nowhere else. Yet the doors stand open inwardly. He may leave, he may enter another room. He may dwell there until its atmosphere becomes familiar. The room of fulfillment is not built when you enter it. It was there. You awaken to it. You accept it. You allow its atmosphere to become your own. That is what assumption is. That is what prayer is. That is what remembering the fulfilled desire does. It moves you into the room where the answer already exists. Now perhaps you will ask, if all states already exist, why do I not experience them all at once? Because consciousness experiences the state with which it identifies. The field of possibility is infinite, but experience is selective. You live from the state you accept as self. You become conscious of being a certain kind of person, and from that consciousness flows your world. If you are conscious of being overlooked, life will arrange appearances around that identity. If you are conscious of being chosen, life will reflect that as surely. If you are conscious of being delayed, time will seem to drag. If you are conscious of fulfillment already behind you, circumstances begin to bend toward that remembered fact. This is why self-concept matters so deeply. But tonight, we approach self-concept through memory. We do not merely say, I am this. We inwardly place ourselves after the fulfillment and recall it. That recollection gives the new identity a history. It lets the state feel lived rather than merely declared. It adds depth. It transforms an affirmation into an atmosphere. And atmosphere, when accepted, becomes the womb of manifestation. You do not invent fulfillment, you awaken to it. Let those words remove any sense of falseness. When you say, I remember when it happened, you are not playing a childish game. You are consenting to the reality of you are aligning consciousness with a version of experience already complete in the unseen. You are choosing a mansion room and taking up residence there. You are allowing your inner life to be educated by completion rather than by delay. And because the world is consciousness objectified, it must eventually testify to the state you have chosen. A man who has entered wealth may still see old bills for a time, but he is no longer spiritually poor. A woman who has entered love may still see silence for a moment, but she is no longer inwardly abandoned. One who has entered freedom may still notice external traces of the former prison, but he is no longer identified with captivity. The outer world is late, it reports the past. It does not command the future. The state within is the active principle. The unseen is not unreal, it is only unseen. This becomes especially important at night, because before sleep, the mind is more capable of loosening its rigid attachment to present appearances. In the day, a man may feel compelled to argue with facts. At night, the facts grow distant, the senses weaken, the body softens, the outer world, which once seemed so loud, begins to fade. And in that softened hour, the truth of imagination may enter with less resistance. You may feel yourself move into the finished. You may remember what the senses still call future, because in the deeper mind, the barrier of time is not so absolute. So tonight, do not struggle to fabricate a reality. Do not exhaust yourself trying to make the impossible real. Instead, recognize that the fulfilled state exists already. Move into it, sit within it, breathe from it, remember from it. Let it become intimate. Let it cease to feel like a distant construction and begin to feel like a creation is finished and consciousness enters what it is willing to accept. What are you willing to accept tonight? Are you willing to accept that the answer exists? Are you willing to accept that the state of fulfillment is available now? Are you willing to stop worshipping the current evidence and begin honoring the unseen cause? Are you willing to remember your desire as though it had already become part of your experience? If so, you are not deceiving yourself. You are awakening to a deeper order of reality. You are turning away from the shadow and toward the source. You are choosing the room in which you will dwell. And as you dwell there inwardly, the outer world will, with unfailing obedience, rearrange itself to match. You do not invent fulfillment, you awaken to it. The unseen is not unreal, it is only unseen. The outer world is always late to the truth of imagination, so let imagination speak first. Now let us look more closely at time, not as men measure it by clocks and calendars, but as it is felt within consciousness. For a desire often appears delayed, not because it is truly far away, but because you inwardly experience it as distant. You place it beyond yourself. You speak of it as later. You sense it as approaching. And consciousness, faithfully reflecting the state you occupy, gives you the experience of separation, distance in time. A thing feels far because you have accepted it as far. A thing feels postponed because you have inwardly placed it beyond your present possession. A thing feels delayed because the self you inhabit is still the self before fulfillment. You say, it will happen. And in that phrase, you locate yourself on this side of the event. You say, one day it shall be mine. And in that declaration, you admit that today you remain without it. You say, I am getting closer. And consciousness hears, I have not arrived. This is the subtle tyranny of inward time. It is not merely that you wait outwardly, you wait inwardly. You become familiar with waiting. You learn the emotional posture of waiting. The body knows it, the mind knows it, the imagination knows it. There is a quiet leaning forward in your whole being, as though fulfillment were somewhere just beyond reach. And because you continue to occupy that leaning state, life arranges itself in ways that continue the experience of approach without arrival. If it feels far, consciousness experiences it as far. This is why the change must occur within first. You do not collapse time by forcing the outer world to hurry. You collapse time by withdrawing your allegiance from the state of delay. You cease to feel yourself as one who is still before the event. You begin to feel yourself as one who is already beyond it. You move inwardly from not yet to it is behind me now. The state that says not yet carries its own world. In that world, signs appear, but conclusions do not. Hope rises but does not settle. Possibility opens but certainty remains postponed. One feels always on the edge, always almost, always nearly. This state may even seem spiritual because it is full of longing. It is still waiting. The state that says it is behind me now is entirely different. It does not strive. It does not lean. It does not scan the horizon. It rests. It remembers. It carries the fulfilled event as a part of inward history. The body softens because the mind is no longer projecting its desire ahead of itself. The heart settles because it has ceased to place peace in another hour. When the desire feels remembered, the waiting state. This is the inner meaning of what men might call the shortening of time. It is not that you manipulate hours like objects in your hand. It is that you stop inhabiting the consciousness of delay. You no longer live as one who is separated from fulfillment by distance. You let fulfillment become inwardly near, then inwardly present, then inwardly past. And as the inner distance disappears, the outer arrangement begins to change. The past is settled, the future is suspended, but imagination may reverse the posture of the mind. Think of what this means. The past has a certain authority because you accept it without effort. The future has uncertainty because you hold it in suspense. Imagination allows you to reverse that posture. What you once held as future, you may inwardly take up with the quietness of past fact. What you once chased, you may remember. What you once stretched toward. In doing so, you are not changing time by force. You are changing your relationship to the desired state. And that relationship is what matters creatively. Suppose a man longs for reconciliation. If he thinks, perhaps in time we will speak again, he places reconciliation in the uncertain future. He remains the man who waits for restoration. But if, in the deep quiet before sleep, he assumes, I remember when we spoke again. I remember how calm it felt after. I remember the relief of no longer carrying that distance. Then he has moved inwardly beyond the event. He is no longer separated from it by expectation. He has occupied the state after fulfillment. And the old experience of delay begins to lose its claim upon him. Suppose a woman desires a home of her own. If she says, one day I will live there, she keeps herself outside its walls. Even if she dreams of it lovingly, she may still be the one looking in from. But if she closes her eyes and remembers, I remember waking there on that first peaceful morning. I remember how natural the room felt after a while. I remember thinking that I had once feared it would never happen. Then her consciousness no longer stands outside. It has entered. The home is not a distant promise. It is an inwardly inhabited fact. Suppose one longs for freedom from a long burden. And if he says, eventually this season will pass, he is still bound to the present struggle. But if he remembers, I remember when it was over. I remember the first day I noticed I had stopped thinking about it. I remember how ordinary peace became. Then he withdraws from the tyranny of duration. He no longer measures the distance ahead. He lives from the end already crossed. Distance in time is often only distance in assumption. You may have noticed this even in ordinary life. When a joyful event is expected in the distant future, the days can feel slow because the mind continually places happiness ahead. But once the event has occurred, those same days behind it seem to collapse in memory. They no longer feel vast. They are simply the path by which one arrived. Now imagine taking that same inward authority before the visible arrival. Imagine letting the mind regard fulfillment with the completed ease it ordinarily reserves for what has already happened. This is the sacred reversal. The mind that waits measures time. The mind that remembers occupies fulfillment. The waiting mind asks, how much longer? The remembering mind says, that season is over. The waiting mind looks at the road. The remembering mind rests in the destination and glances back. And what you remember inwardly begins to gather the world around itself. This is one of the great mysteries of assumption. A state once truly accepted draws corresponding facts toward expression. It rearranges attention. It influences speech. It alters reaction. It makes certain opportunities visible that were previously ignored. It causes one conversation to occur instead of another. It makes the body carry itself differently. It changes the emotional atmosphere through which you meet the world. And through all these natural channels, the outer life begins to support the inwardly accepted fact. The world gathers around the remembered end, but do not become anxious over the mechanics. The mechanics belong to the bridge, not to your faith. Your work is not to stand over time with a whip. Your work is to stop granting delay a sacred authority in consciousness. You are free tonight to cease feeling that your desire is far away. You are free to withdraw from not yet. You are free to let the fulfilled state feel as if it has already crossed the threshold and belongs to your lived experience. If it feels remembered, consciousness experiences it as complete, and if consciousness experiences it as complete, the state of waiting is no longer nourished. That does not mean you force yourself to ignore every outer appearance. It means you no longer draw identity from appearances. You no longer call yourself the one who is waiting merely because the senses still report the old reflection. You understand that the visible world is delayed testimony. It is not the supreme authority. Imagination is. So tonight, ask yourself gently, where have I placed distance? What desire have I unknowingly banished to a future that never quite arrives? What sentence have I repeated inwardly that preserves separation? Soon, eventually, in time, one day, notice these words without guilt. They reveal a posture. Then begin to change the posture. Say inwardly, with softness, it is behind me now. Perhaps at first the mind resists. Let it. You are not fighting, you are choosing. Return to the remembered state. Feel what would be different in your body if the matter were already in the past. Would the breath be quieter? Would the heart be less hurried? Would the stomach unclench? Would the eyes soften behind closed lids? Let the body answer before the mind fully understands. It is behind me now. Not the desire itself, but the waiting for it. Not the joy, but the longing. Not the fulfillment, but the separation from it. What once seemed ahead now becomes inwardly complete. What once appeared distant now comes near through memory. What once belonged to some day now belongs to the calm interior language of I remember. The future is often only the name we give. Accept it, and future begins to lose its distance. Remember it, and delay begins to lose its throne. Sleep in it, and the subconscious receives the impression of completion. Remain faithful to it, and the outer world must slowly or suddenly yield its corresponding form. This is why I do not ask you tonight to wait better. I ask you to stop waiting inwardly. There is no virtue in postponing your own consciousness of fulfillment. There is no wisdom in remaining. If the state of the fulfilled desire exists, and if consciousness can enter any state it accepts, then enter now. Let time as inward separation fall away. Let the desire no longer be a horizon. Let it become a recollection. You may say gently, I remember when it happened. I remember how long ago the waiting ended. I remember the calm after the answer came. I remember how strange it felt that I had once thought it was far away. Let these words move through you slowly. They are not to be hurried. They are not to be shouted. They are to be felt as a reorientation of being. The waiting self steps aside. The remembering self takes its place. The one who counted days yields to the one who has crossed beyond the event. The past is settled. The future is suspended. But imagination may reverse the posture of the mind. Tonight, reverse it. Do not reach forward. Look gently back. Do not ache toward. Remember from beyond. It do not sleep in the consciousness of delay. Sleep in the consciousness of completion. And as you do, what you remember inwardly begins to gather the world around itself. The state becomes more natural. The body begins to accept it. The mind ceases its old leaning. The night receives a different impression. The subconscious no longer hears, it is far. It hears, it has been. And in silence, without strain, the bridge begins to. No, you do not have to wait from within. You may rest tonight in the fulfilled past of consciousness. There is a mistake many make when they begin to imagine the fulfillment of desire. They leap at once to the most dramatic instant, the flash of surprise, the sudden phone call, the first moment of receiving, the breathless announcement, the cry of relief, the trembling hands, the overwhelming shock that something long desired has finally come. And though such moments may indeed occur in the world of experience, I tell you, they are not always the strongest place from which to assume. The first gasp is still very close to the old state. It remembers the waiting. It remembers the uncertainty. It still carries the contrast between I did not have it and now it has arrived. It is beautiful. Yes, it may be moving. It may stir strong feeling, but it can also keep the mind attached to the moment of arrival rather than the state of possession. And possession is what you truly want. You do not want arrival. You want possession. You do not want one instant of excitement. You want the condition to be yours. You do not merely want the door to open. You want to live in the room beyond it. You do not merely want to hear the yes. You want to inhabit the life that follows the yes. You do not merely want to receive. You want to become the one who has received and now lives from that new reality naturally. Do not imagine the first gasp. Imagine the quiet after. That sentence is worth dwelling upon. The quiet after. The peaceful hour after the event has already taken place. The evening after the answer has come. The morning after the good news is no longer news but fact. The ordinary afternoon after the burden has lifted and life has begun to arrange itself. This is where the state becomes powerful because it has lost the restless flavor of transition. It is no longer coming. It is no longer startling. It is woven into who you are. The miracle becomes most powerful when it feels ordinary. Now, this may appear strange to one who has longed for something with great intensity. He may say, but I want to feel the joy, I want to feel the shock, I want to feel the triumph, and I do not deny him joy. I do not tell him to suppress the beauty of fulfillment, but I tell him that if he would impress the subconscious most deeply, he should move beyond the emotional explosion of arrival into the settled certainty of after. For the state is strongest when fulfillment no longer astonishes you. Why? Because astonishment still belongs in part to the old identity. One is astonished because one had not yet become familiar with having. One is shocked because the fulfilled condition still feels unusual. But if you would become the man or woman for whom the desire is natural, you must enter a scene in which fulfillment has already become natural. You must imagine yourself not as one still marveling that it happened, but as one who now lives from it. If you desire wealth, do not only imagine the check arriving, or the account changing, or the first moment of financial relief. Go beyond that. Imagine yourself months after freedom has become your atmosphere. The matter that once troubled you no longer stands over every thought. You pay what must be paid with ease. You choose without that old contraction in the stomach. You sit quietly in the evening, and the mind is no longer occupied with fear. Perhaps you remember that there was once a time when money seemed like a wall, and now that wall is gone. But the greater feeling is not astonishment. It is normality. It is the quiet dignity of one who is supplied. Imagine the ordinary after. Imagine a morning in which you rise, and financial peace is simply part of the day. You do not begin by calculating panic. You prepare for the hours ahead with calmness. Perhaps there is a letter on the table, but it no longer carries the old power. Perhaps there is a payment to be made, but it is made without inner drama. The freedom has been yours long enough that the nervous system has learned this is wealth as state, not merely wealth as event. If you desire love, do not only imagine the first message, the first declaration, the first embrace after longing. Those moments may be tender, but they still remember separation. Go beyond them. Enter the settled life after harmony has become familiar. Imagine yourself months into the relationship, when affection no longer feels like a rare visitation, but like the natural climate of your days. Imagine hearing a familiar voice across the room and feeling no anxiety, only belonging. Imagine a hand resting in yours, not as a shocking miracle, but as something so natural that the heart no longer questions whether it is allowed. Imagine the ordinary peace of being chosen. The bond feels normal. The warmth feels normal. The presence feels normal. You are not astonished by love, because you have become one who lives in love. That is the state to occupy. If you desire healing, do not remain forever at the first sign of improvement. Do not live only in the moment when symptoms begin to fade. Go beyond the turning point. Imagine the body has been well long enough that wellness feels ordinary. Imagine moving through a day without monitoring, without counting discomfort, without inwardly asking whether things are getting better. Imagine a simple walk, a simple meal, a simple conversation, and the great miracle is that nothing in you is preoccupied with the former concern. Health has ceased to be dramatic. It has become natural. You no longer think of it every hour because it has become the unremarkable foundation of experience. That is the quiet after. That is the assumption of established wellness. If you desire success, do not only imagine the first offer, the first applause, the first moment when someone congratulates you. Go beyond that. Imagine the role is now familiar. You walk into the place that once seemed distant, and it is simply where you belong. You know the rhythm of the work. You speak with ease. You are no longer inwardly asking whether you deserve to be there. You are there. It is settled. Others may recognize you, but recognition no longer startles you. It is part of the order of your life. You have become the one who occupies that station naturally. The state is strongest when fulfillment no longer astonishes you. Let this truth become clear. The subconscious is not only impressed by intensity, it is deeply impressed by naturalness. A thing that feels natural is accepted. A thing that feels accepted becomes part of self. And what becomes part of self must be reflected in the world. So when you imagine, seek the stable atmosphere that follows. Do not imagine the thunderbolt alone. Imagine the sky after the storm has passed. Do not imagine the first breath after release alone. Imagine the hours afterward when breathing deeply has become ordinary. Do not imagine the opening of the prison door alone. Imagine walking freely the next day without even glancing back at the bars. You do not want arrival, you want possession. Arrival is a point, possession is a state. Possession is identity. Arrival may be thrilling, possession is creative. Arrival says, it has just happened. Possession says, this is my life now. And because your outer world responds to the state you most deeply occupy, possession is what must be cultivated, not in the abstract, but through imaginal experience. You move inwardly, beyond the point of fulfillment, and settle into the life after. You feel from there, you remember from there, you sleep from there. Now ask yourself gently, if my desire had happened some time ago, what would be ordinary now? That question will reveal more than the mind expects. If love had already entered, what would be ordinary? Perhaps going to sleep without wondering whether you are wanted. If prosperity had already come, what would be ordinary? Perhaps opening the post without dread. If healing had already occurred, what would be ordinary? Perhaps making plans without consulting fear. If success had already become your reality, what would be ordinary? Perhaps speaking of your work without shrinking inwardly. The ordinary after reveals the state. This is why it is so useful. The mind may dramatize the moment of receiving because it has seen that scene many times in desire. But the ordinary after asks for a deeper shift. It asks who you would be once the desire no longer dominates your emotional weather. It asks how you would live if the thing were not a miracle you hoped for, but a fact you had integrated. It asks you to leave the identity of the seeker and enter the identity of the possessor. Do not imagine the first gasp. Imagine the quiet after. Perhaps you desire reconciliation. Many would imagine the first apology, the first call, the first meeting after silence. But go farther. Imagine an ordinary conversation weeks later, where the former distance is, you speak naturally. You laugh perhaps, the strain has faded, the relationship has resumed its easy rhythm. There is no need to keep revisiting how the reconciliation happened, because it belongs to the past now. That is the state of restoration. Not merely the dramatic turning, but the natural life after the turning. Perhaps you desire a home. Many imagine receiving keys, opening the door for the first time, walking through empty rooms in wonder. Good, but imagine sitting in that home on an ordinary evening. The furniture is in place, the air carries the fragrance of your own life. You know where everything belongs. You move through the rooms without novelty because they are yours. The desire is no longer a dream of acquisition. It has become the environment of being. The home does not astonish you every second. It holds you. It is natural. Perhaps you desire freedom from an inner burden, a fear, a habit, a long emotional. Do not only imagine the instant of breakthrough. Imagine the weeks after, when you realize that you have not thought from that old fear in some time. Imagine noticing its absence almost casually. Imagine saying to yourself, I used to live under that cloud. There is no fireworks, only spaciousness. And that spaciousness is the state you wish to occupy. The miracle becomes most powerful when it feels ordinary. This is not because the miraculous has become less magnificent. It is because it has become yours. What is truly possessed need not prove itself every hour. It does not need constant astonishment to maintain its reality. It rests in the background of consciousness as fact. You are not surprised every morning that your name is your name. You do not gasp each time you remember where you live. The truths most deeply accepted are often the least dramatic. They are quiet because they are settled. That is what I want for your desire tonight. Not that you diminish its beauty, but that you assume it so thoroughly that it loses the strain of exceptionalism. Let it cease to feel impossible, rare, distant, or shocking. Let it feel like something that has already become integrated into the fabric of your life. Let it feel like your ordinary after. Now let us practice inwardly, without pressure. Take your desire, whatever it is. Do not go to the instant when it arrives. Move beyond it. Perhaps several days beyond. Perhaps several weeks. Perhaps months. There is no rigid measure. Choose a distance that allows the event to feel settled. See yourself there. Feel yourself there. Not in a blur, but in a simple, ordinary moment. What are you doing? Where are you sitting? What no longer troubles you? What has become normal because the desire has been fulfilled? If it is peace, feel the ordinary evening when your mind is quiet. If it is love, feel the ordinary morning when you are secure in affection. If it is supply, feel the ordinary act of making a choice without fear. If it is healing, feel the ordinary movement of the body without concern. If it is success, feel the ordinary rhythm of one who belongs where he once longed to be. Do not strain for a magnificent image. Let a small scene rise. Perhaps you are simply sitting with a cup in your hand, but now you are the one who has received. Perhaps you are walking through a familiar room, but now the burden is gone. Perhaps you are hearing someone speak, but now the old separation is over. Perhaps you are reading a letter, but now it is not the letter of arrival. It is a later letter read by the person who already lives beyond the change. The ordinary detail is enough if the state is fulfilled. Let that ordinary detail carry the full weight of possession. Let it whisper, "This is my life now." Let it say, "The thing I once desired has already settled into experience." Let it become so unforced that the body relaxes around it. That relaxation is evidence you are moving beyond arrival and into ownership. The first shock keeps the desire special. The quiet after makes it natural. The intense climax may excite the mind. The settled aftermath changes identity. And identity, not passing excitement, is what shapes reality. Suppose you have imagined the same dramatic moment many nights and still feel tense around the desire. Perhaps this is why. Perhaps you have repeatedly rehearsed the edge of receiving, but never given yourself the experience of being beyond the edge. You have remained at the threshold. Tonight, step past it. Let the door close softly behind you. Let the waiting belong to the past. Let the arrival itself belong to the past. Let the life after fulfillment be present within you now. Do not imagine the first gasp. Imagine the quiet after. There is extraordinary power in the scene where nothing extraordinary seems to be happening, because the greatest transformation has already happened before the scene begins. In that scene, you are not wishing, you are living. You are not pleading, you are being. You are not hoping the event will occur. You are using the event as remembered history and inhabiting the self who emerged after it. This is the secret of after. It contains the fulfillment without clinging to the moment of arrival. It implies the miracle, but it does not dramatize the transition. It places you firmly in possession, and because your consciousness is the creative power, possession must be the state you accept if possession is what you wish to experience outwardly. You do not want arrival, you want possession. Say that inwardly and feel its truth. I do not seek a moment alone. I enter the life after. I do not chase the door opening. I remember standing within. I do not cling to the first shock. I rest in what has become natural. Let these meanings settle. Let them soften your approach. There is no need to force a spectacle. Let the fulfilled life be simple. Let it be normal. Let it be yours. In time, the outer world will appear to have arranged itself naturally around that which you have inwardly made natural. And when it comes, perhaps you will see that the greatest sign of mastery was not the intensity of your longing, but the ease with which you finally allowed fulfillment to become ordinary within you. Now let me make the movement exact, so that you may carry it into the night without confusion. You are not to stand in the present, stare forward at your desire, and ask how it will reach you. You are not to look down the road of time and strain your eyes for signs of its approach. You are not to remain at the beginning of the bridge, wondering when the first plank will appear beneath your feet. That is the old posture. That is the posture of waiting. Tonight, I ask you to do something entirely different. First, inwardly enter the fulfilled life. Move beyond the event. Stand after it. Let the answer already have come. Let the door already have opened. Let the burden already have lifted. Let the relationship already be established. Let the healing already have become familiar. Let the opportunity already be yours. Let the change already belong to your experience. Do not remain before the desire. Move to the other side of it. Do not stare forward at the promise. Stand beyond it and look back. This is the memory position. It is a small shift, but it changes everything. Most people ask, how will it happen? But the one who occupies fulfillment does not ask that question in the same way. From the fulfilled state, the question becomes, do I remember how it felt when it did? Not because the precise outer route is the cause, but because the feeling of recollection places consciousness where it belongs, after the event, in possession, in completion. The question is no longer, will it happen? The question is, do I remember how it felt when it did? Feel the difference. One question reaches forward in uncertainty. The other looks backward from fulfillment. One is hungry, the other is settled. One asks from absence, the other recalls from possession. This backward glance carries the dignity of completion. It does not chase, it does not plead, it does not beg the outer world to rearrange itself quickly enough to relieve you. It stands quietly within the accomplished state and allows memory to form around it. It says, I am already here, let me remember the day I arrived. And that remembering impresses the subconscious with a very different atmosphere from hope, anticipation, or desire held in the future. Let us take it slowly. Suppose there is something you deeply want, perhaps peace in a troubled matter, perhaps the restoration of a relationship, perhaps financial relief, perhaps a new home, perhaps success in an undertaking. Whatever it is, do not begin by asking, how can I obtain it? That question belongs to the old state. Instead, let the body soften, let the breath slow, and inwardly move to a time after the fulfillment, not the first second of receiving, not the moment of shock, after the good news has settled, after the tears, if there were tears, after the first astonishment has passed, after the change has become part of life. Stand there, feel that you are there. You are now the person for whom it already happened. Perhaps it is several days later, perhaps several weeks, perhaps months. Choose the distance that makes the fulfillment feel natural. The exact measure is not important. The inward result is important. You must feel beyond the event, not before it. You must feel that the matter belongs to your lived experience. Now, from that fulfilled position, turn inwardly backward. Recall the day it resolved. Do not project a possible day. Remember it. Perhaps you remember the morning the letter arrived. Perhaps you remember the tone of a voice delivering good news. Perhaps you remember standing in a room and suddenly knowing the old chapter had ended. Perhaps you remember sitting down afterward, not because you were exhausted, but because relief had moved through the body so deeply that stillness felt natural. Perhaps you remember saying to yourself, so it is done. Perhaps you remember telling someone close to you. Perhaps you remember the first quiet night afterward, when sleep came more easily because the old worry had lost its authority. You are not asking how this will happen. You are remembering when it happened. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember the moment I knew. I remember how different the room felt afterward. I remember how natural life became once the matter was settled. Let these phrases guide the posture of your imagination. They are not lines to recite mechanically. They are inward directions. They turn the gaze of consciousness. They pull you out of the restless forward lean and place you in the backward glance of fulfillment. The backward glance carries the dignity of completion. Why does it carry dignity? Because it does not struggle with time. It does not bargain with the future. It does not tremble before uncertainty. It has already accepted the end. It remembers from there. And the one who remembers possesses a different self-concept from the one who waits. The waiting self says, I hope to be. The remembering self says, I have been through this. I know the other side. This is crucial. You do not merely create a scene. You locate yourself. The scene is useful only because it places you in the fulfilled state. The true art is not in collecting mental pictures. It is in adopting the identity of one who is already beyond the desire. The backward glance helps you do that with extraordinary precision. Suppose your desire concerns financial freedom. Do not sit here asking, how will the money come? Instead, move inwardly to a time after the burden is gone. Perhaps you are seated near a window, reading calmly. The old pressure has lifted. Your life has adjusted. Now turn back gently and remember the day the matter resolved. Remember opening a letter. Remember hearing the news. Remember placing the paper down and breathing differently. Remember the quiet afterward. You need not know the actual route. The feeling of recollection is enough. It tells consciousness, this belongs to my completed experience. Suppose your desire concerns love restored. Do not ask when will they speak, what will they say, how will it unfold. That keeps you before the event. Instead, move inwardly into the life after restoration. Perhaps you are walking together in peaceful companionship. Perhaps you are sitting in a room where silence is no longer painful but comfortable. From there, remember the day reconciliation took place. Remember the relief in the chest. Remember the sentence that made you know the old distance had ended. Remember how natural closeness became afterward. Again, you are not constructing the bridge. You are standing beyond it and looking back. Suppose your desire concerns healing. Do not remain mentally at the first test result, the first symptom changing, the first sign of improvement. Go beyond that. Feel yourself living well again. Feel the body moving without fear. Then, from that state, remember the day when you realized the old concern had truly passed. Remember the first morning of freedom. Remember the moment of gratitude. Remember the deep quiet of knowing that restoration had entered your life. It is that backward recollection, not forward anxiety, that carries completion. Suppose your desire concerns success or a new position. Do not spend all your imagination imagining the offer arriving. Go beyond it. Feel yourself already established. The role is familiar. The work is yours. Then look back and remember the day it opened. Remember who told you. Remember the first moment of relief. Remember saying inwardly, it happened. Feel that memory without reaching for it. Let it come from the self who already lives in the fulfilled state. Do not stare forward at the promise. Stand beyond it and look back. There is tremendous power in this because the ordinary mind is trained to think only from the present circumstances toward the desired future. It says, here is where I am, there is where I want to be. How do I get there? But imagination, rightly used, need not remain enslaved to this linear posture. It can move into the desired state now. It can assume the end. It can remember backward from fulfillment. And once it does, consciousness has changed its orientation. The old question weakens. How will it happen? Loses force. When will it happen? Loses urgency. What if it does not happen? Loses its familiar throne. Because the mind is now standing where these questions no longer arise naturally. A man who remembers yesterday does not worry about whether yesterday will occur. A woman who recalls having received a letter does not ask whether the letter is on its way. A person who stands inwardly after fulfillment does not need to torture himself with the path, because from that position the path is already past. The question is no longer, will it happen? The question is, do I remember how it felt when it did? Now, do not become overly technical. This is not a complicated mental exercise. It is a shift of inner stance. You may use only one simple memory, perhaps a single sentence, I remember the relief. Perhaps one image, your hand resting on a table after the matter was settled. Perhaps one bodily sensation, the deep exhale after long tension. Perhaps one quiet thought, so that chapter is over. These are enough if they arise from the afterstate. The memory position is not built by force. It is entered by consent. You consent to leave the present facts for a moment and stand in the fulfilled condition. You consent to feel as though the desire is no longer ahead. You consent to let memory form around that assumption, and the more naturally you occupy it, the more the subconscious receives a finished impression. There is no need to hurry. Let this become comfortable. The first time you try, the mind may leap back to the present and ask again, but how? Be gentle. That question is habit. Do not answer it with argument. Return to the memory position. Move once more beyond the desire. Turn once more backward. Say inwardly, I remember when it happened. Let the mind settle there again. Every return strengthens the new posture. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember how calm everything felt afterward. I remember the day the waiting ended. I remember how natural fulfillment became. These are not evasions. They are placements of consciousness. They place you beyond the desired event. They teach the deeper mind that you are no longer identified with waiting. They remove the emotional authority of delay. They bring the sense of completion into the present moment through recollection. And remember, what you are doing here is not trying to predict the outer event in detail. You are not trying to guess the exact conversation, the exact date, the exact circumstance. You are entering the feeling of an already completed fact. The details of the bridge may reveal themselves in ways you could not foresee. Do not burden the inner act with the need for accuracy of outer mechanism. The state is the secret. The memory position is a way of occupying the state. A man may remember that his burden lifted without knowing inwardly whether it came through one person or another. A woman may remember that love returned without prescribing every word of its arrival. Another may remember that peace came without naming every circumstance that led to it. The feeling of completion is what matters. The backward glance need not become a script for the world. It is a throne for consciousness. The backward glance carries the dignity of completion. Let that dignity enter you. No pleading, no anxious imagination, no bargaining with time. Simply the quiet authority of one who stands beyond and recalls. This is a noble state. It frees you from the smallness of constant asking. It gives you an inward certainty far more stable than emotional excitement. It allows you to sleep not as the seeker, but as the one who has already crossed the threshold. Perhaps tonight, before sleep receives you fully, you will practice this in the simplest possible way. Let the body rest. Let the room fade. Choose your fulfilled desire. Step beyond it. Feel yourself after. Then softly, inwardly, look back and remember. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember how natural it became. Remain there as long as it feels gentle. Do not strain to hold it. Let it hold you. And if sleep comes while you are remembering, let sleep come. You have planted not a question, but a completed impression. You have entered not a wish, but a state. You have ceased staring forward at the promise. You have stood beyond it and looked back. Now let me give you the language that belongs to this state, because language is not a small thing. Words reveal where consciousness is standing. They disclose whether you are waiting, hoping, straining, or remembering. A man who says, I hope it resolves, still lives before the resolution. A woman who says, I believe it will work out, may still be leaning toward some distant tomorrow. But the one who says, I remember when it finally resolved, has stepped beyond the event. He no longer speaks from suspense, he speaks from completion. The language of memory calms the nervous system. It does not rush, it does not plead, it does not keep the body suspended in anticipation. It tells the deeper mind that the matter is no longer pending. It has crossed over. It belongs to experience now. This is why the simple phrase, I remember when, carries such quiet power. It invites the whole being to settle. It gives the desire a past tense in consciousness. It takes what once seemed ahead and places it gently behind you, where completed things rest. I remember when it finally resolved. Feel how different that is from I hope it resolves soon. One phrase still waits at the gate. The other recalls leaving the gate behind. One phrase keeps the muscles of the mind alert. The other allows them to soften. One phrase belongs to longing. The other belongs to possession. I remember how peaceful I felt afterward. This is another beautiful way to enter the state. Do not only remember the event, remember the peace after the event. Remember the feeling in the body when the mind no longer needed to search. Remember the evening when you sat quietly and realized that the old burden had lost its claim. Remember the breath that came more deeply. Remember the absence of pressure. Remember how strange and tender it felt to no longer be held by fear. The mind believes more easily what it feels it is recalling. This is why I ask you to use language that opens memory rather than language that pushes toward the future. When you say I remember, the mind naturally relaxes into the tone of something known. It does not immediately rise to debate in the same way. It may still resist at first if the old state is strong, but the form of the phrase itself invites a gentler inward response. It says, we are not chasing this, we are revisiting it. And that distinction changes the entire emotional field. I remember the first morning after everything changed. Let that phrase carry you somewhere. Perhaps in that remembered morning, the room was the same, yet everything felt different. Perhaps the light entered as it always had, but your heart did not meet it with the same old heaviness. Perhaps you woke, and there was one quiet second before thought, and then you remembered, it is done. Perhaps you smiled without effort. Perhaps you touched the pillow beside you, or rose from bed, or simply breathed, and all of it felt new because the matter that had troubled you no longer stood between you and peace. I remember thinking, so it was done all along. This phrase contains a deep recognition. Often when fulfillment comes, man sees that his fear exaggerated the distance. He sees that the thing he called impossible had already begun arranging itself long before he perceived it. He sees that the answer was moving while he still worried. He sees that the bridge was forming before the senses gave him visible proof. And looking back, he says inwardly, so it was done all along. There is humility in that, there is relief in that, there is wisdom in that. It moves the mind away from panic and into trust. Memory speaks with the authority of completion. It does not command loudly. It does not struggle to become convincing. It possesses a quiet finality. When you remember something ordinary from the past, you do not use force to sustain its reality. It remains true without pressure. This is the quality you are cultivating around your desire. You are learning to speak inwardly as one who has already lived beyond the event. If your desire concerns money, do not keep saying, "I hope I will be provided for." Move gently into memory. Say inwardly, "I remember when the financial pressure finally lifted." Let the words form slowly. I remember the day the matter was settled. I remember how calm I felt afterward. I remember opening the post without dread. I remember sitting at the table and realizing I no longer carried that fear in my stomach. I remember thinking, so it was done all along. If you desire a particular sum, perhaps you recall the season after it arrived, not the first shock, but the ease after. I remember when the money came through in the most natural way. I remember how the need that once troubled me was answered. I remember telling someone close to me that everything had worked out. I remember the gratitude that came quietly, not as a cry of desperation, but as the gentle overflow of having received. Let the words move through you as though they belong to your inner history. Do not hurry, do not ask whether they are vivid enough. Let them do their quiet work. The aim is not to construct a grand performance. The aim is to let consciousness become familiar with completion. If your desire concerns love, the language of memory may become very soft. I remember when I no longer felt uncertain. I remember when love became natural instead of distant. I remember the first evening I rested in the feeling of being chosen. I remember how safe my heart felt. I remember the quiet joy of knowing I did not have to chase affection anymore. Notice that these are not the words of someone begging for love. They are the recollections of one who has entered the state of being loved. Perhaps you desire reconciliation. Then you may say, "I remember when we spoke again. I remember the tenderness of that moment after all the silence. I remember how much lighter I felt afterward. I remember how natural our conversation became once the old tension passed. I remember thinking, so the distance was never final." In this way, you do not dwell upon absence. You remember restoration. You let the inner man stand on the far side of the reconciliation. If your desire concerns health, speak from the life beyond the struggle. I remember when strength returned. I remember the day I noticed the old fear was no longer ruling me. I remember how peaceful I felt after receiving the good news. I remember the first morning when my body felt simply like my own again. I remember moving through the day with ease. I remember thinking, so healing had already begun before I could see it. The words need not be many. They need only guide you into a state. Each phrase is like a hand gently turning your face away from the future and toward a fulfilled past. Each phrase says, "This is not ahead of me. This belongs to me now as remembered experience." If you desire a move, a home, a new place of belonging, you may inwardly say, "I remember when I finally settled into my new home. I remember the quiet of the first night after everything was in place. I remember walking from room to room and feeling that I belonged there. I remember how natural it became to wake in that space. I remember thinking, this is my life now." You do not stay outside the home, imagining that one day you may enter. You remember living there. If your desire concerns work, position, recognition, or success, the memory may sound like this: I remember when the opportunity opened. I remember how relieved I felt after the answer came. I remember the first ordinary day in that new role, when the excitement had settled, and I simply knew that I belonged there. I remember how naturally I carried myself. I remember thinking, this has become part of who I am. The language of memory gives success roots. It no longer appears as an event suspended ahead. It becomes a chapter already written in consciousness. If you desire emotional freedom, release from sorrow, freedom from an old inner wound, you may say, I remember when that heaviness began to dissolve. I remember the evening I realized I had not returned to the old thought all day. I remember how peaceful the mind felt once I stopped carrying that burden. I remember the first night I slept without replaying the past. I remember thinking, so this too could be left behind. This is not denial of pain. It is assumption of liberation. The language of memory calms the nervous system because it closes the loop of uncertainty. The body does not have to keep preparing for an answer when consciousness speaks, as though the answer has been lived. The breath can slow, the jaw can soften, the chest can loosen. The mind is no longer commanded to remain alert before an unknown future. It is invited to rest in a completed experience. Now, do not misunderstand me. I do not say that words alone possess magic. A phrase repeated with panic is still panic. A sentence spoken while inwardly gripping the old state may remain a shell. The power lies in the feeling into which the phrase carries you. I remember when is useful because it naturally encourages the feeling of recollection. It helps you move from wishing to having been fulfilled. But you must let the phrase become felt. You must allow the body to respond. You must let the inner atmosphere shift. Say, I remember when it finally resolved, and pause. Let the mind search gently, not for evidence against it, but for the feeling that would accompany such a memory. Perhaps a sigh rises. Perhaps the body settles. Perhaps the room seems quieter. That is the doorway. Do not rush past it. Rest there. Say, I remember how peaceful I felt afterward, and do not merely pronounce the words. Let peace become present in a small measure. Let afterward become now in consciousness. Let the relief that would follow fulfillment arrive as an inner fact. Say, I remember the first morning after everything changed, and allow one image to arise. A morning light, a familiar room, the body waking without the old tension, the mind discovering that it no longer carries the same question. This is enough. It need not be elaborate. It must only be inhabited. Say, I remember thinking, so it was done all along, and feel the surrender in that phrase. The old strain need not continue. The bridge may already be moving. The unseen may already be arranging. The fulfilled state may be nearer than your fear imagined. Let the phrase quiet you. Memory speaks with the authority of completion, and completion is what the subconscious receives most deeply, not merely desire, not merely effort, not merely repeated words. Completion, the felt sense that the matter is already settled in being. The language of remembering helps establish that feeling. It gives you a gentle vocabulary for the state of done. It gives the mind something softer and truer to rest upon before sleep. You may use these phrases tonight not as a rigid sequence, but as a stream. Let them move naturally according to your desire. I remember when it finally resolved. I remember how peaceful I felt afterward. I remember the first morning after everything changed. I remember thinking, so it was done all along. I remember how natural it became. I remember when the waiting ended. I remember when the burden lifted. I remember when love felt safe. I remember when supply became ordinary. I remember when healing ceased to feel distant. I remember when the answer became part of my life. Each phrase is a gentle step away from longing and into recollection. Each phrase helps the mind release the future. Each phrase invites the body to soften into the state of having already received. And because this is a night teaching, let these words become increasingly quiet now. Let them fall more slowly. Let them become less like instruction and more like an inner lullaby of completion. You do not need to retain, you need only absorb the mood. The mind believes more easily what it feels it is recalling. So recall softly, recall peace, recall relief, recall belonging, recall restoration, recall provision, recall freedom, recall the fulfilled life as though it had already placed its hand upon your shoulder and said, yes, it happened, you may rest now. And as you rest, let memory speak. Let it speak with the authority of completion. Let it become the language your inner world understands tonight. Let your final words before sleep, whether spoken inwardly or only felt, carry the tone of remembrance. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember how natural it became. There is a reason the feeling of memory is so restful to the soul. A true memory has no uncertainty in it. It does not lean forward. It does not stretch its hands into tomorrow. It does not pace before the door of life, asking whether the answer will come. It has already crossed the threshold. It belongs to completion. A memory has no future tense. When you remember something that truly happened yesterday, you do not ask, will it happen? You do not ask, how will it come? You do not ask, when shall I receive it? Those questions would be absurd, because memory stands on the other side of fulfillment. The event is closed. The issue is settled. The thing no longer requires arrival. It has been absorbed into experience. This is why the remembered end is so powerful in consciousness. It frees the mind from the three great agitations that preserve waiting: doubt, timing, and the need to know how. First, doubt begins to weaken. Doubt lives on uncertainty. It feeds upon the feeling that the matter is still undecided. It asks, what if it does not happen? But what room is there for that question when consciousness has entered the state of recollection? If you are remembering the fulfillment, you are no longer emotionally seated in the possibility of failure. You are seated in the aftermath of success. Doubt may still knock at the door of habit, but it finds less hospitality. The mind is no longer entirely arranged around suspense. It has tasted completion. The remembered end does not ask for proof. A man who remembers receiving a letter does not run from room to room, searching for evidence that the letter came. A woman who remembers having crossed a bridge does not stand at the starting point, demanding signs that the bridge exists. The memory itself carries its own authority. It does not need to be supported by outer confirmation in order to feel real inwardly. And when you assume your desire in the same manner, you begin to withdraw your dependence upon proof. You stop begging the senses to authorize what imagination has already accepted. This does not mean you become careless in life. It means you cease making external evidence the master of your inner state. You cease saying, "I will rest when I see." You begin saying, "I have rested in consciousness, and the world will answer in its season." This is a different relationship to manifestation altogether. The outer world may still be arranging itself, but you are no longer arranging your peace around its delay. Second, obsession with timing begins to weaken. The mind that waits is fascinated by clocks. It counts hours. It measures days. It wonders why it has not yet occurred. It keeps a ledger of delay. But memory is free from this torment. When you remember something, you may know when it happened, or you may not recall the exact day. Yet the essential truth remains. Its reality does not depend upon your constant measurement of time. What is remembered is no longer pursued. The pursued thing always feels ahead. The remembered thing rests behind. The pursued thing activates hunger. The remembered thing allows satiety. The pursued thing makes you ask, how much longer? The remembered thing says, that season passed. And when this inward shift occurs, the tyranny of timing begins to lose its hold. You may still live within the visible sequence of days, but inwardly you are no longer a prisoner of them. You are not waiting from within. Perhaps you have suffered from the repeated thought, "It is taking too long." See what state that thought reveals. It is the state of one who stands outside fulfillment and measures the distance. But if tonight you assume, "I remember when it happened," the distance changes character. You are no longer measuring the road before you. You are glancing back upon a road already traveled. That one shift can bring a deep exhale to the whole body. Third, attachment to the root begins to weaken. Most people, even after they have accepted that imagination creates reality, still want to dictate the means. They say inwardly, "It must come through this person. It must arrive by this channel. It must take this exact form." And because they remain attached to the root, they continue to watch, calculate. But memory has no need to design its own path. A remembered event already occurred somehow. Whether you know every step or not, the fact remains. The how dissolves when consciousness stands after the event. This sentence should bring you peace. When you stand before your desire, the how appears enormous. It may seem like a wall. You ask, "But how could this be arranged? How could this person return? How could this money come? How could this door open?" Yet when you stand after the event in imagination, the how loses its throne. It becomes historical rather than problematic. It happened. The route existed. The bridge was built. You do not need to stand here and invent it. You remember from beyond it. This is one of the most liberating aspects of the method. It does not require the conscious mind to solve life. It asks the conscious mind to assume the end and allow the deeper law to arrange the means. When you remember the fulfilled desire, you are relieved of the burden of managing the invisible machinery. You are no longer compelled to watch the hidden roots beneath the soil. You let the seed grow because in the posture of memory, you already know there was a harvest. Consider a person who longs for financial relief. In the waiting state, he asks, "How will the money come? Who will provide it? What if nothing opens?" The mind turns restlessly among possibilities and fears. But in the remembered state, he says, "I remember when the matter was settled. I remember how surprised I was by the naturalness of it. I remember how the route became clear only afterward." See how the inner atmosphere changes. The need to force a channel begins to dissolve. The burden of planning the impossible is released. Consider one who desires reconciliation. In the waiting state, she asks, "When will they speak? How will they reach out? What words will be used?" She watches the outer world with tension. But from memory, she says, I remember when we spoke again. I remember how peaceful it felt after the distance was gone. I remember thinking that the unfolding had been perfect, though I could not have planned it. The how falls away. The relationship is remembered from completion, and the mind rests. Consider one who longs for healing. In the waiting state, he asks, when will I improve? How long will this last? The body tightens under the weight of uncertainty. But in the memory state, he says, I remember when strength returned. I remember the day I stopped measuring every symptom. I remember looking back and seeing that the path had unfolded quietly. Again, the need to control sequence weakens. Peace returns. A memory has no future tense. The remembered end does not ask for proof. What is remembered is no longer pursued. The how dissolves when consciousness stands up. These four truths explain why remembered fulfillment is so restful. It gathers the scattered faculties of the mind and brings them into one settled posture. Doubt no longer has the same ground. Time no longer feels like an enemy. The root no longer demands constant supervision. The mind is permitted to rest in completion, and rest is not emptiness. Rest is creative. Rest is the Sabbath of assumption. It is the inner stillness that follows when the desire is accepted. Men often think that worry proves seriousness, that constant attention proves faithfulness, but worry merely proves that the state of fulfillment has not yet been inhabited. When the end is remembered, the mind need not keep tightening itself around the desire. It has entered possession. It can become quiet. This quietness is precious before sleep. The night magnifies whatever state you carry into it. If you carry restless questions, the subconscious receives restlessness. If you carry pursuit, it receives pursuit. If you carry uncertainty, it receives uncertainty. But if you carry the remembered end, the subconscious receives a completed impression. It receives no argument, no chase, no frantic demand for method. It receives the felt fact of fulfillment. This is why before sleep, I ask you to move beyond all three burdens, beyond doubt, beyond timing, beyond how. If doubt arises, return gently to the if timing arises, return again. That season is already behind me in consciousness. If the root arises, return once more. It happened. The means were contained in the end. Let the mind settle each time into the after state. Do not argue with the old questions. Let the remembered end answer them by its very presence. A true memory closes the matter, not with violence, not with suppression, with completion. The conversation is finished because the event is. The search is finished because the thing has been found. The chase is finished because possession has begun. This is the emotional relief you are learning to enter. This is why the body may begin to soften when you remember rather than hope. The chest loosens, the stomach quiets, the breath deepens, the nervous system receives the inward message. There is no unresolved emergency here. The desire is not lost in time. It has already been accepted as fact. The remembered end does not ask for proof. Feel that. You are allowed to stop asking for proof tonight. You are allowed to stop inspecting the visible world for permission to rest. You are allowed to let imagination carry authority. What has been accepted within does not become true because the world confirms it. The world confirms it because it has been accepted within. What is remembered is no longer pursued. Feel that too. You are allowed to stop chasing the thing in thought. You are allowed to stop calling it toward you as though it were absent. You are allowed to rest in the certainty of possession. You may still take natural actions in life, but inwardly you do not run after the desire. You move from the memory of having received. The how dissolves when consciousness stands after the event. Let that ease your mind. You are not responsible for foreseeing every turn. You are not required to map the bridge of incidents. You are not asked to coerce the world into place. Your work is inward. Enter the state. Remember from fulfillment. Let the law select the path. The end contains the means, as the seed contains the tree. If this feels too simple, that is only because the mind has been trained to equate complexity with power. But the law is simple. The state is everything. The remembered end is powerful because it is a state of closure. It is a state of no longer waiting. It is a state of no longer asking life to deliver proof before resting. It is a state of no longer binding fulfillment to one route. It is inward freedom. And inward freedom is the beginning of visible change. So tonight, do not merely picture what you want. Enter the memory of already having received. Let it become gentle and complete. Let it carry no future tense. Let it ask for no proof. Let it pursue nothing. Let it leave the how behind. Say, I remember how peaceful I felt afterward. I remember that I no longer needed to ask when. I remember that I no longer needed to know how. I remember how natural it became. I remember the relief of completion. And as you rest in these words, feel the mind quieting. Feel the desire no longer straining forward. Feel the body no longer tasked with waiting. Feel the old hunger loosening. Feel the inward scene closing around you like a finished chapter. This is the power of memory. No doubt, no chasing, no how, only completion, only recollection, only the calm authority of something inwardly done. Now let us look at the deeper mind, that silent builder within you, which never sleeps in the way the outer man sleeps. The conscious mind measures days, remembers dates, arranges events along a line, and says this happened yesterday, that may happen tomorrow, this belongs to the past. But the subconscious does not work by the calendar. It does not stand beside a clock and inquire whether an inward experience belongs to one side of midnight or another. It receives the felt fact. It accepts the impression that carries reality. It responds to conviction, not chronology. The deeper mind receives the felt fact, not the clock. This is of great importance, for if you imagine a desire as something still approaching, the subconscious receives approach. If you imagine it as uncertain, it receives uncertainty. If you imagine it as remembered, settled, already crossed, it receives completion. It does not debate with the impression. It does not ask, did this occur in outer space and time? It asks nothing. It accepts what is inwardly given with feeling and begins to outpicture a world consistent with that acceptance. The subconscious accepts felt states. A feeling of fear may be accepted, though no, a feeling of lack may be accepted, though abundance exists all around. A feeling of rejection may be accepted, though no one has spoken a word in that moment. Why? Because the deeper mind does not wait for objective proof before receiving a state as real. It receives whatever you dwell in with conviction. And if fear, lack, and rejection can be impressed without outward evidence, then surely peace, fulfillment, provision, and love can be impressed in the same way. It does not favor sorrow over joy. It does not give special authority to fear. It accepts the state that is inwardly felt as true. This is why I tell you that a remembered act carries the stamp of completion. When you inwardly say, I remember when it happened, and you feel the quiet finality of something already done, the subconscious does not rise up and protest, no, this belongs to a later date. It receives the state of done. It receives the inward fact that the matter is settled, and having received it, it begins to build accordingly. It does not ask whether the memory belongs to yesterday or tomorrow. It receives the impression and builds accordingly. There is a great simplicity here. Men often make the inner work complicated because they imagine the subconscious as a critical judge, scrutinizing every act, comparing it against the visible world, refusing admission unless the senses approve. But the subconscious is not the reasoning mind. It is the womb of expression. It receives, it shapes, it externalizes. What the conscious mind plants in feeling, the subconscious develops into form. If the conscious mind says, I am still waiting, and feels waiting deeply, the subconscious accepts waiting and brings forth circumstances that preserve waiting. If the conscious mind says, it has already happened, and enters the quiet, settled mood of recollection, the subconscious accepts fulfillment and begins arranging the bridge by which fulfillment appears. It does not need to know whether your inward act resembles a past memory or a future event. It knows only the quality of conviction, and conviction is what gives the impression life. This is why feeling is the secret, not feeling as dramatic emotion alone, but feeling as reality. The feeling of this is so, the feeling of I know, the feeling of it has already been received, the feeling of I have passed beyond the event. That feeling, even when quiet, is what impresses the subconscious. A loud declaration without inward acceptance may fall upon the surface of the mind and pass away. But a soft inward recollection, felt as true, descends deeply. It enters the creative depths. It becomes seed. Imagine two men. One repeats with great intensity, I will succeed, I will succeed, I will succeed. Yet inwardly he is tense, watchful, still measuring the distance. His words are future words. His feeling is not yet. The subconscious hears not merely the sentence, but the state beneath it. It receives striving. it receives incompletion, it receives the energy of becoming. The other sits quietly before sleep and says only, I remember when it opened. He does not shout, he does not labor, but as he speaks inwardly, his shoulders soften, his breath slows, his mind ceases searching. He feels the event as already belonging to his experience. Which impression is deeper? The first man has many words but little completion. The second has few words but the stamp of done. The subconscious receives the second more powerfully, because it receives the felt fact. The deeper mind receives the felt fact, not the clock. This explains why your nightly practice matters so greatly. Before sleep, the conscious mind relaxes its resistance. It argues less. It supervises less. The impressions you accept in that drowsy state sink more readily into the subconscious. If you fall asleep worrying, the subconscious receives a worried fact. If you fall asleep waiting, it receives a waiting fact. If you fall asleep remembering the desire as already fulfilled, it receives a completed fact. And through the night, while your outward senses are at rest, the deeper mind continues its work. It does not sleep as you sleep. It receives, it organizes, it gives shape to the accepted state. It begins to influence perception, impulse, speech, movement, opportunity, and the unfolding of circumstances in ways the waking mind could never fully trace. This is not fantasy. It is the operation of consciousness. The outer world is the later period. Therefore, what is impressed upon the deeper mind must eventually find expression in experience, unless it is displaced by a contrary assumption more deeply accepted. This is why consistency matters. Not strain, but consistency. Not anxious repetition, but faithful return. If night after night you bring the same desire into the feeling of remembered fulfillment, you are impressing one coherent fact upon the subconscious. You are giving it a clear pattern. You are no longer scattering contradictory seeds. One night you do not say it is mine, and the next hour it will never come, with equal conviction. You learn to return to the remembered state. You learn to say, no, I know this inwardly as done. And the more often the subconscious receives that coherent impression, the more naturally the world begins to arrange itself around it. It receives the impression and builds accordingly. Consider the desire for peace in a troubled matter. If each night you replay the conflict, mentally argue, predict fresh pain, and then fall asleep in emotional unrest, the subconscious receives unrest as the reality to continue. But if you enter sleep remembering harmony as already restored, feeling the quiet aftermath of resolution, the deeper mind receives peace. It receives the completed relationship. It receives the fact that the burden is behind you. Then life begins to move toward the expression of that accepted state, perhaps through a softening of your own reactions, perhaps through an unexpected message, perhaps through a change in circumstances, perhaps through a bridge you could not plan. But the beginning is inward. Consider the desire for provision. If before sleep you feel the weight of unpaid needs, if you count anxieties, if you imagine tomorrow's pressure, the subconscious receives lack. But if you say inwardly, I remember when the matter was settled, I remember how naturally supply came, I remember how calm I felt afterward, and you feel that as a quiet, completed experience, the subconscious receives supply, it receives settled relief, it receives the state of one who has already crossed through fear into provision, and the world begins to answer. Consider health. If each night the mind turns only to symptoms, measurements, worries, and fear of what may come, the subconscious receives disorder as the reality most deeply occupied. But if, gently and without force, one assumes the memory of restored wholeness, one who remembers moving freely again, one who remembers the old concern as past, the subconscious receives health as inward fact. And because it receives the felt fact rather than the clock, it does not ask whether the visible body has yet caught up. It begins to build from the new state. The same principle applies to love, to work, to home, to freedom, to every desire that represents a state of being. The subconscious does not need external confirmation to accept your inward assumption. It accepts what is felt as real. This is why men and women have long been creating unconsciously through fear and expectation without realizing it. They imagine unwanted futures vividly, feel them deeply, and then say, I knew it would happen. But what they call foreknowledge was often prolonged assumption. They impressed the deeper mind with a feared result and then experienced its echo. If this law has worked unwittingly in fear, it can work consciously in fulfillment. You do not need to fear the It is not against you. It is obedient. It is fertile. It is the faithful servant of the impression received. If you have fed it anxiety in the past, do not condemn yourself. Simply begin now to offer another state. Offer remembered relief. Offer settled completion. Offer the inward fact of the desire already fulfilled. The deeper mind does not hold grudges. It responds to what is now being impressed. New seed may be planted. The remembered act carries the stamp of completion, because memory is not asking to become. It declares itself as already known. When you inwardly remember the desire, you are not merely making a picture. You are giving the subconscious the emotional signature of closure. There is no open question. There is no anxious suspense. There is a completed event, inwardly felt, and completion is a powerful instruction. Let us linger there. Completion has a different vibration in consciousness than desire. Desire may be beautiful, but it can be restless. Completion is settled. Desire says, I would have. Completion says, I have known. Desire says, come. Completion says, it came. Desire says, may it be. Completion says, it was, and I remember. The subconscious receiving completion begins to make your world agree with completion. It receives the impression and builds accordingly. This is why tonight you need not strain to create a whole history. One small remembered act, if felt deeply, is enough. Perhaps a simple inner phrase, I remember when the pressure ended. Perhaps the memory of placing a letter down after reading good news. Perhaps the bodily feeling of relief while lying in bed after the desired change had already occurred. The subconscious does not require elaborate scenes. It requires reality of feeling. If the act carries the quality of done, it has power. The conscious mind may ask, was it vivid enough? Did I do it correctly? Did I create enough detail? Let such questions pass. The deeper mind is not impressed by quantity of detail apart from conviction. It is impressed by the felt fact. A faint image with genuine acceptance is stronger than a brilliant inner movie watched with doubt. A single remembered sigh of relief can penetrate more deeply than many strange scenes of arrival. The issue is not spectacle. The issue is reality. The deeper mind receives the felt fact, not the clock. So do not stand before sleep trying to explain time to the subconscious. It does not need explanation. Do not argue with it that the event belongs to yesterday, though the senses call it tomorrow. Simply feel the completion. Let the memory position carry you. Enter the after state. Recall the relief. Sleep in that. The subconscious understands the state because the state is its language. It does not ask whether the memory belongs to yesterday or tomorrow. It receives the impression and builds accordingly. Let this release you from intellectual strain. You do not need to solve the philosophy of time in order to use the law. You only need to recognize that the deeper mind responds to accepted reality, and the remembered end is one of the gentlest, most effective ways to present fulfillment as accepted reality. Tonight, therefore, when the room grows still, when the breath becomes slower, when the body yields to rest, let your inner word become simple. Do not say, I hope. Do not say, I am waiting. Do not say, how long. Say, if it feels right, I remember. Then let the memory unfold with the atmosphere of fact. I remember when it resolved. I remember how peaceful I felt afterward. I remember how natural fulfillment became. I remember the first quiet morning after everything changed. I remember thinking, so it was done all along. And as you rest in that mood, know that the subconscious receives not your date, not your calendar, not your outer sequence, but the inward fact. It receives the state of completion. It receives the certainty. It receives the remembered act. And in silence, it begins to shape the corresponding world. That is enough. The seed has been given. The deeper mind knows what to do. The hour before sleep is not empty. It is fertile. It is one of the most sacred intervals granted to man, though most pass through it without understanding its power. They think the day is ending, but in truth, a new pattern is being planted. They think they are merely becoming tired, but the gates of the deeper mind are opening. They think they are drifting away from life, but they are entering the workshop where tomorrow's life is shaped. This is why I ask you to listen now with gentleness. Do not strain to grasp every word. Let the words move through you as the room itself begins to soften. Let the body rest more heavily where it lies. Let the hands release any small effort they have been holding. Let the shoulders sink. Let the face grow smooth. Let the breath become slower, quieter, less deliberate. You need not command these things. Night is already doing them for you. The body knows the way towards sleep. You only need to stop interrupting it. As the breath slows, the day begins to recede. The concerns that seemed so large in the brightness of waking life begin to lose their sharpness. The room remains, yet it feels farther away. The sounds around you become softer, less demanding. The body grows heavy, not with burden, but with surrender. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer have the same authority. They pass more slowly. They seem less solid. The reasoning mind, which spent the day measuring, comparing, objecting, and demanding evidence, becomes less rigid. It loosens its grip. It grows quiet enough that imagination may speak without being immediately interrupted. This is the state I have often described as a state akin to sleep. It is neither full waking nor complete unconsciousness. It is a tender borderland. You are still aware, yet no longer fully engaged with the outer world. The senses weaken and the inner world draws nearer. The mind is still present, but it is no longer standing guard with the same severity. And in that softened interval, the assumption you choose may sink deeply into the subconscious. As the senses weaken, the remembered end can enter more deeply. This is why the nightly practice is so powerful. During the day, if you attempt to remember your desire as already fulfilled, the waking mind may interrupt. It may point to appearances. It may say, but look at the facts, look at the delay, look at what has not happened. It may insist on remaining faithful to the evidence of the senses, but before sleep, these arguments become less forceful. The mind tires of debating. The body no longer wishes to stand at attention before the world. The visible realm dims, and the remembered end, which may have seemed difficult to accept at noon, can feel much more natural at night. Sleep seals what waking reason still tries to debate. Let that settle in you. There are truths the waking mind examines and resists, not because they are false, but because they are unfamiliar. It has been trained to trust only what appears before the senses. It has been trained to react to circumstance and then call that reaction truth. Yet as sleep approaches, the old guard softens. The mind becomes more receptive to a different kind of certainty, not the certainty obtained by outward proof, but the certainty of inward acceptance. This is the moment to enter the after state. Not tomorrow, not when conditions improve. Now, in this quiet threshold, let yourself imagine that the desire has already passed through fulfillment and settled into your life. Do not look toward it as something still coming. Move beyond the arrival. Enter the ordinary after. Feel yourself in the state that exists once the matter is already resolved. Allow the mind to rest there gently. Perhaps you remember a conversation that occurred after the change. Perhaps you remember the first peaceful morning after the answer came. Perhaps you remember sitting quietly, surprised not by drama, but by calm, realizing that the old tension had disappeared. Perhaps you remember looking back and thinking, so it had been working all along. Let one such memory rise. Do not force it. Do not build it with strain. Do not turn the practice into labor. Let it come as memory comes. A few details, a tone of voice, a room, a feeling in the chest, a single sentence, a soft recognition. I remember when it happened. That is enough to begin. The power is not in making the scene large. The power is in accepting it inwardly. In this drowsy state, one small memory of fulfillment, if felt as real, may impress the subconscious more deeply than hours of anxious repetition in full waking effort. Why? Because anxious effort often carries but quiet recollection carries the atmosphere of done. The subconscious receives atmosphere. It receives state. It receives the felt fact. So let the body grow heavier. Let the breath lengthen. Let the room fade farther into the background. Let the eyes rest behind their lids. Let the mind become less interested in argument. And from within that gentle softening, enter the memory. I remember when it finally resolved. Perhaps you do not see the whole event. That is all right. Feel the end of the waiting. Feel the sense that the matter no longer stands unfinished before you. Feel how different your body would be if the answer had already come. The shoulders would not hold the same tension. The chest would not guard itself in the same way. The breath would descend. Let the body begin to imitate that fulfilled state, not as a performance, but as a response. I remember how peaceful I felt afterward. Perhaps peace is the first thing you can feel. Let that be your doorway. Do not search frantically for images. Let peace itself become the evidence of the remembered end. If the desire had been fulfilled yesterday, what would you feel tonight as you lie here? Relief, softness, quiet gratitude, a gentle sense of having crossed a bridge. Let that feeling spread as far as it can, even if only slightly at first. I remember the first morning after everything changed. Perhaps that morning comes faintly, a dim room, a softer, the realization that something once heavy was no longer unresolved. You do not need to see it with perfect clarity. You only need to accept that such a morning belongs to your inner history now. Let it exist. Let it be known. Let the subconscious receive it as a completed fact. The hour before sleep is not empty. It is fertile. Most men allow this hour to be filled by leftovers from the day. They replay conversations. They worry over problems. They imagine defeat. They enter sleep carrying unanswered questions like stones in the mind. And then they wonder why the next day resembles the last. They have planted the old state at the very hour when the subconscious was most open. They have fallen asleep in waiting and awakened into more waiting. They have fallen asleep in fear and awakened with fear renewed. But you need not do that tonight. You may choose differently. You may enter sleep as one who remembers completion. You may give the deeper mind not the residue of anxiety, but the calm impression of fulfillment already lived. This is not escape from life. It is preparation for a different life. The outer world does not change because you lie awake in conflict with it. It changes because consciousness changes. And consciousness is most easily impressed when the senses are quiet, when the body is at rest, when the mind is no longer defending yesterday's evidence with such force. As the senses weaken, the remembered end can enter more deeply. Perhaps during the day, you attempted to feel that your desire was already fulfilled, and the mind objected. It showed you contradiction. It brought forward familiar worries. It asked for proof. But now, as sleep approaches, you do not need to defeat every objection. You can let them drift away. You can let the room dim around them. You can let the body outgrow the need to answer them. You can simply return to the memory. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember how natural it became. Let each phrase be like a soft hand guiding the mind inward. Do not chant them rapidly. Let them breathe. Let space exist around them. Let one phrase settle before another arrives. In this state, the pause matters. The silence between words allows the feeling to deepen. The subconscious is not impressed by speed. It is impressed by reality. You may notice yourself moving closer to sleep. The words may begin to lose their exact shape. That is not failure. It is the practice fulfilling itself. Sleep is drawing near. The impression has been selected. The desired memory has been introduced. Let sleep carry it inward. Sleep seals what waking reason still tries to debate. The conscious mind may wish to verify. Did I do it correctly? Was it enough? Should I try again? Let that desire to inspect dissolve. It belongs to waking effort. You are moving beyond effort now. You have chosen the state. You have allowed the memory. You have felt, even for a little while, the quietness of what is already done. That is sufficient. Do not dig up the seed as soon as it is planted. Let sleep cover it. Imagine a farmer placing a seed into rich soil at twilight. He does not kneel above the ground throughout the night demanding visible proof of growth. He trusts the unseen. He knows that darkness does not cancel life. Darkness nourishes what has been planted. So too with your assumption. As you fall asleep, do not demand outer proof before morning. Trust the impression. Trust the state. Trust that what has been received inwardly does not vanish merely because the senses are no longer observing. The subconscious continues in silence. It does not need your supervision. It does not require your anxious assistance. It receives the remembered end and works from it. This is why a few quiet minutes before sleep can become so consequential. They do not look dramatic from the outside. A person lies still in a darkened room. The breath slows. The eyes are closed. Nothing appears to be happening. Yet inwardly, a world is being selected. An identity is being assumed. A desire is being transformed from distant future into remembered fact. And what is accepted in that sacred interval begins to press toward expression. Do not underestimate this hour simply because it is silent. The most powerful operations are often silent. Seeds open in silence. The dawn approaches in silence. The heart changes in silence. The subconscious receives in silence. The hour before sleep is not empty. It is fertile. Let this fertility serve you tonight. Let it receive only what you choose to continue. Do not bring the old waiting self across the threshold. Do not carry the burden of when into sleep. Do not allow the outer facts to have the final word before unconsciousness. Give the final word to imagination. Give the final feeling to completion. Give the final state to remembered fulfillment. If your desire concerns love, sleep not as one wondering whether love will come, but as one remembering when it became secure. Let the final emotion be warmth, belonging, calm. If your desire concerns money, sleep not as one calculating lack, but as one remembering when the pressure lifted. Let the final emotion be relief, steadiness, quiet supply. If your desire concerns healing, sleep not as one fearing tomorrow's symptoms, but as one remembering when the body returned to ease. Let the final emotion be gratitude, softness, peace. If your desire concerns reconciliation, sleep not as one rehearsing silence, but as one remembering when the distance ended. Let the final emotion be tenderness, release, acceptance. If your desire concerns a home, a position, a breakthrough, a freedom, sleep from the afterstate. Remember, let it be completed inwardly. Let the night receive the version of you who already lives beyond the desired change. You are not trying to force life. You are selecting the state from which life will respond. You are not begging the future. You are impressing the subconscious with a finished fact. You are not waiting for the outer world to let you rest. You are resting inwardly, so the outer world may begin to reflect that rest. And now, as the body grows even heavier, perhaps you can feel how close the threshold is. The breath is slower, the mind is softer, the room feels distant, words are beginning to drift rather than strike. This is good. This is the doorway. Enter it gently. One memory, one fulfilled fact, one quiet after, one inward recollection that says, it happened. Rest there. If the scene fades, keep the feeling. If the words fade, keep the state. If even the state begins to dissolve into sleep, let it dissolve in peace. You have installed the memory. You have given the deeper mind its impression. You may now be carried by sleep. Sleep seals what waking reason still tries to debate, so let it seal fulfillment tonight. Let it seal the remembered end. Let it seal the calm certainty that what you have inwardly accepted is already alive in consciousness and moving, silently, faithfully, toward visible form. Now let yourself become still, not by command but by permission. There is nothing you need to solve in this moment, nothing you need to arrange with the outer mind, nothing you must pursue before you are allowed to rest. The day has already given what it could give. The world outside this room may continue in its own movement, but for these moments you are withdrawing from its demands. You are entering a quieter chamber, a place beneath effort, beneath urgency, beneath the habit of reaching forward. Let the body settle more deeply. Feel the weight of it where it rests. Let the back be supported. Let the legs grow heavy. Let the hands loosen. Let the fingers stop preparing to hold or correct or manage. Let the shoulders descend as though they have been carrying something too long and have finally been told they may place it down. Let the muscles of the face soften. Let the brow smooth. Let the jaw unclench. Let the tongue rest naturally. Let the breath find a quieter rhythm without being forced, without being counted, simply allowed to become slower, because there is no danger in this moment, no task requiring haste, no outer circumstance that must be wrestled while you lie here in the dark. The room is still around you. Perhaps you hear some distant sound, perhaps the faint murmur of life beyond the walls, perhaps only silence. Let every sound move farther away. Let it lose its sharpness. Let it become part of the background, as though the world is gently receding from you. You do not need to push it away. You simply allow your attention to draw inward. The bed beneath you is real enough for the body. The breath within you is real enough for the body. The quiet gathering around you is real enough for the body. But the deeper world of imagination is drawing nearer now, and you are permitted to enter it, not hurriedly, not with strain, gently, naturally, as one steps from a bright room into a softer one, and waits for the eyes to adjust. Let the present room fade a little, not disappear, but soften. Let its outlines become less important. Let the walls, the ceiling, the furniture, the darkness around you become distant. You are not fleeing them. You are merely turning from the outer chamber to the inner one. You are moving into the place where states are chosen, where desire is not chased but assumed, where what the senses still call future may be accepted as already fulfilled. Now bring to mind the desire that matters most to you in this moment. Do not struggle to choose perfectly. There may be one desire that rises on its own. Let it be that. Perhaps it is relief from a matter that has weighed on you. Perhaps it is restoration in love. Perhaps it is financial peace. Perhaps it is a home, a change in work, a healing, a freedom from anxiety, a life no longer bent under the same old burden. Whatever comes gently to mind, receive it without tension. Do not look at it from the state of wanting. Do not stare at it as something still waiting beyond you. Do not imagine the first instant when it appears. Tonight, you will go beyond that. You will move inwardly into the fulfilled life, not the moment of change, but after. After the answer, after the relief, after the door has opened, after the burden has lifted, after the thing you once longed for has already become part of your experience. Let the desire have happened. Let it have crossed the threshold. Let there have been a day when it resolved. Let there have been a turning point, and let that turning point now belong to the past of your imagination. You need not see every detail. You need not know exactly how it came. It came. That is enough. You are not planning it. You are remembering from beyond it. Move there now. Move to the life after. Perhaps the first sense of it is not a picture, but a feeling, a softness, a release, a lack of pressure where there had been pressure before. Let that feeling lead. If the matter is resolved, how do you feel lying here tonight? If the burden is already gone, what is absent from the body? If the answer has already come, what no longer tightens in you? If the desired change has already entered your life and remained long enough to become normal, how does the breath move now? Let the body answer. Maybe the chest opens slightly. Maybe the stomach settles. Maybe the shoulders fall another fraction. Maybe the hands loosen further. Maybe you feel the first hint of inward relief, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but quiet and believable. Let that be the doorway into the after state. You are now beyond the unresolved matter. It is behind you. The days of intense waiting have already ended. The question that once followed you from morning to night no longer rules the mind. You may remember that there was once a time when it seemed large, when it felt urgent, when you wondered how it could ever change. But that time is over. You are in the life after. You are resting in the world that exists once the desire has already been fulfilled. If your desire concerns a matter resolved, let yourself feel the ordinary peace of resolution. Imagine that there was a day when the news came, when the answer was known, when the uncertainty closed. But do not stay at that day. Move further. It is now afterward. Perhaps a week afterward, perhaps several weeks. The matter no longer dominates every thought. You can think of it without anxiety, because it has finished. You may recall it almost with surprise, as one remembers a storm after the sky has cleared. I remember when it resolved. I remember how much lighter everything felt afterward. I remember how quietly life continued once the old question was gone. Let that become real within you, not with force, with tenderness. The mind does not need to know more. The subconscious receives the feeling of resolution. It receives the state of one who no longer waits. If your desire concerns a burden lifted, feel the life after the burden. Perhaps there was a financial concern, a responsibility, a fear, a conflict, a condition that seemed to press upon the heart. Tonight you do not carry it into sleep. You are already after it. The weight that once sat upon the chest has been removed. The morning after its resolution has already passed. The evening after has already passed. You have lived several ordinary hours without the old pressure. You remember how strange it felt at first to be free of it, and how natural that freedom then became. I remember when the burden lifted. I remember sitting quietly and realizing I no longer had to carry it. I remember how peace returned in a way that felt almost simple. Let the body rest in that remembered relief. Let the nervous system receive the permission to stop guarding against what has already ended in consciousness. Let the old tension realize it is no longer needed here. If your desire concerns a home entered, move beyond the first opening of the door. Do not remain at the moment of keys, though that moment may be beautiful. Go farther. You have already lived there for some time. The rooms are familiar. The light through the window is no longer surprising. The path from one room to another is known by the body. You have placed your things. You have rested there. You have woken there more than once. You do not think, will this ever be mine? It is yours in the after state. You are simply in it. Feel yourself walking through that home, not as a visitor, but as one who belongs. Perhaps you pause by a table. Perhaps you stand near a window. Perhaps you sit in a chair that has already become part of your ordinary life. The air feels peaceful because it is familiar. Nothing needs to be claimed. It has already been accepted. I remember when I entered this life. I remember how natural this place became. I remember the first quiet night when I truly felt at home. Let the sense of belonging settle into you. A home is not only walls, it is a state of inward possession. Let yourself possess it now. If your desire concerns a relationship that has become normalized, do not remain at the first confession of love, the first reunion, or the first dramatic moment of closeness. Move beyond it. Enter the relationship after it is steadied. It is no longer uncertain. It is no longer a question. The bond has become part of life. You wake knowing you are loved. You go through the day knowing you are chosen. There is no constant need to inspect, to fear withdrawal, to wonder whether affection will disappear. Love is present. Love is familiar. Love has become the atmosphere rather than the miracle you are waiting for. Perhaps you remember an ordinary evening together, perhaps a quiet conversation, perhaps shared silence that feels warm rather than empty. Perhaps the ease of hearing a voice and no longer fearing distance. Perhaps the calm of knowing that what once seemed out of reach is now woven gently into your days. I remember when love became easy. I remember when I no longer feared being forgotten. I remember how natural it felt to be chosen. Let that normality enter. The state of love fulfilled is not always loud. Often it is deeply peaceful. Let the body feel that peace. Let the heart stop leaning forward. Let it rest where love is already known. If your desire concerns a peaceful life after the turning point, imagine that you are now living in the season that came after the old strain broke. Perhaps there was not one single outer event, but a gradual reordering. The days became lighter, the mind became quieter, the old pattern weakened, the world began to feel less threatening. You are now beyond the period of constant struggle. You have crossed into greater ease. There is room in the breath again. There is softness in the mornings. There is a gentle confidence in the evenings. Remember a simple day in that life. Perhaps you wake, and there is no rush of dread. Perhaps you eat slowly. Perhaps you walk and notice the air. Perhaps you receive ordinary news without fear turning it into disaster. Perhaps you lie down at night and feel gratitude that the old heaviness is no longer the law of your being. I remember when life became peaceful again. I remember when the old fear stopped leading me. I remember the quiet after the turning point. Let that become your inner atmosphere now, not as a distant promise, but as a lived condition. The fulfilled life is not only one event. It is the state of consciousness that follows the event. Enter that state. Let it be yours now. The present room fades a little more. The outer world becomes less important. The body rests more heavily. The mind is no longer required to construct. It may receive. It may allow. It may float within the fulfilled after state without effort. You are not trying to make something happen by force. You are practicing occupancy. You are dwelling in the reality in which it has already happened. You are letting the desired state become familiar from the inside. Familiarity is important. The mind resists what feels foreign, but it accepts what it has experienced repeatedly in imagination. And tonight you are giving it the experience of after relief, after receiving, after reconciliation, after healing, after arrival, after the turning point. Stay there gently. You may let one memory form from within this after state, not a long story, just one soft recollection. Perhaps the day the matter resolved, perhaps the first morning after, perhaps the first time you noticed how normal the new life had become. Let it come naturally. I remember the day everything changed. I remember the relief that moved through me. I remember how quiet the room seemed afterward. I remember the strange peace of knowing there was nothing left to fear. I remember how ordinary fulfillment became. Do not hurry from one phrase to the next. Let each one land. Let each one open a small space. The body may respond more deeply now. Perhaps there is a sigh. Perhaps the face softens further. Perhaps you feel less need to manage thought. That is good. The after state is beginning to feel inhabited. Now notice that from this position, the old desire no longer feels like hunger. It feels like history. It feels like something already crossed. You may still appreciate it. You may still be grateful, but you do not chase it. You live beyond the chasing. This is the great freedom of the after state. It removes urgency. It removes the emotional insistence that says, I must get there. You are there. You are simply letting consciousness acclimate to it. If the old mind tries to return with questions, let them pass at a distance. It may ask, but how did it happen? You need not answer. From the after state, you know only that it did. It may ask, but when will this be visible? You need not answer. From the after state, visibility belongs to the unfolding bridge. It may ask, but what if this is only imagination? You may smile inwardly, because imagination is the beginning of every visible thing. Let the questions float by like leaves on water. Do not follow them. Remain where you are. You are after the resolution, after the burden, after the home, after the restoration, after the turning point. And because you are after, you can rest. Let yourself rest there now. Perhaps imagine the room of that fulfilled life around you, if that comes naturally. If not, simply remain in the feeling. It is enough to feel fulfilled after. It is enough to feel that the old story no longer has present authority. It is enough to know inwardly that has already changed. The deeper mind receives the state, not the complexity of the picture. In this after state, gratitude may arise gently, not the desperate gratitude of one trying to attract something, but the quiet gratitude of one who has received. Let it come if it comes. Perhaps a soft inward thank you. Perhaps no words, only warmth. Do not manufacture it. Let it be a fragrance. If you remember the fulfilled life vividly enough, gratitude may appear on its own. And if sleep begins to draw near, do not resist it. You have done what matters. You have moved beyond the present room. You have entered the fulfilled life. You have not imagined the moment of change, but the peace after. You have allowed yourself to begin living from the accomplished state. If sleep comes now, let it carry this impression inward. Let the subconscious receive you as the one who has already passed through the desired event. Before sleep takes you fully, linger once more in a simple inner knowing. It has already happened in consciousness. I am living after it now. The old waiting is behind me. The burden has lifted. The answer has come. The door has opened. The love is secure. The home is mine. The healing is established. The life after the turning point is my life now. Let these meanings flow through you, not as a list to memorize, but as a gentle atmosphere of completion. Let the body receive them. Let the breath slow under them. Let the mind grow quieter around them. Let the room fade until the inner scene or the inner feeling is more present than the old facts. You are not merely understanding a teaching. You are entering an experience. You are learning what it means to rest after fulfillment. You are learning what it means to assume that the desire has already found its place in your life. You are learning what it means to sleep, not before the answer, but after it. And in that sacred after state, remain a little longer, softly, quietly, as one who has received, as one who remembers, as one who no longer waits. Now, let the night become very quiet around you. Let the body rest more completely than before. Let there be no effort in the limbs, no argument in the breath, no task hidden in the muscles. Let the weight of your body be received by the surface beneath you. Let the shoulders sink. Let the hands loosen. Let the chest move gently and naturally. Let the breath deepen without command, as though some wiser part of you already knows that nothing more is required of you tonight. The day is behind you now. Its voices are fading. Its demands are fading. Its unfinished conversations are fading. The world that seemed so immediate a short while ago begins to lose its sharpness. The room softens. The darkness softens. The outlines of things grow less important. You are still here, but you are turning inward. You are entering the deeper chamber where imagination is not a passing image, but the very reality from which life takes form. Do not hurry. There is no rush. You are not trying to achieve a state by force. You are allowing yourself to descend into it. The breath moves in, the breath moves out, and with each exhale, the visible world gives up a little more of its authority. With each inhale, the inner world grows nearer. The bed beneath you remains, but it is no longer the center of attention. The walls remain, but they seem farther away. The room remains, but something within you is becoming more vivid than the room. You are approaching the threshold where the outer senses dim, and the remembered end may be accepted without strain. Tonight, you do not reach toward your desire. Tonight, you remember it, not as a possibility, not as a future event waiting somewhere ahead, not as a wish hovering at the edge of your life. You remember it now, as though it has already taken place, as though the turning point has come and gone, as though the prayer has already received its answer, as though the door once closed has already opened, and you have already walked through. Let your desire appear gently in the mind. Do not search for it. Do not demand clarity. Let the desire that matters most tonight rise naturally. It may concern peace. It may concern love. It may concern freedom. It may concern provision. It may concern a home, a place, a person, a healing, a restoration, a new life. Whatever it is, let it come softly into awareness, and the moment it appears, do not stand before it. Move beyond it. Move beyond the waiting. Move beyond the first sign. Move beyond the first announcement. Move beyond the moment of arrival. Go inwardly to the life after. Feel that the desire has already entered your world and had time to settle there. It is no longer strange. It is no longer astonishing. It has become part of the fabric of your days. You are not just receiving it, you are living after it. Rest there now. If your desire was an answer, the answer has come. If your desire was reconciliation, the distance has ended. If your desire was relief, the burden has lifted. If your desire was supply, you are already provided for. If your desire was healing, the body has already known ease. If your desire was a home, you have already entered it and slept beneath its roof. If your desire was success, the role has already become familiar. If your desire was inner freedom, the old fear has already begun to seem far away. Let yourself be there. Do not observe it from outside. Be the one within the fulfilled life. Feel yourself in that world now. Perhaps the first thing you notice is not an image, but a bodily change. The breath becomes easier. The chest no longer holds the same tightness. The stomach softens. The forehead smooths. The mind does not lean forward as much. There is less pressure to ask, less pressure to know, less pressure to make it happen. Because within this remembered fulfillment, it has already happened. Remain there. Let the fulfilled life become the atmosphere around you. Now, from this life after, begin to remember the day it happened. Not from suspense, from completion. You are looking back. The event is behind you. The uncertainty is behind you. The old waiting belongs to another time. Gently recall the day when the shift came. Perhaps it was a morning, perhaps an afternoon, perhaps an evening. The exact outer form does not matter. Let the memory arise in whatever way is most natural. Maybe you remember the light in the room. Maybe you remember where you were sitting. Maybe you remember the feeling in your hands. Maybe you remember a letter, a conversation, a quiet realization. Maybe the change seemed sudden. Maybe it unfolded softly. But inwardly, you know there was a day when the old story broke and the new fact entered. I remember when it happened. Let that thought move through you slowly. I remember when it happened. And notice the calm that belongs to those words. You are not calling it forth. You are recalling it. You are not asking life to begin. You are remembering that life already turned. You are not standing in the field before harvest. You are holding the grain in your hand and remembering the season it came in. I remember when it finally resolved. If the desire concerned a burden, remember the moment the burden was no longer yours to carry. Remember how your body responded. Perhaps the shoulders dropped. Perhaps you sat down. Perhaps tears came, not from sorrow, but from release. Perhaps you were quiet because relief was too deep for words. Remember that softness. Remember that exhale. Remember the untying of something that had long been knotted within you. I remember the relief. Let the relief become present now, not as imagination forced upon the body, but as a remembered sensation returning. Relief after completion. Relief after the answer. Relief after no longer needing to wonder. Relief after discovering that what once seemed uncertain had already been moving toward resolution. The breath deepens. The body becomes heavier. The room fades another step. You are inside the memory now. Perhaps you remember who you told. Perhaps there was one person who came instantly to mind. Someone whose face you wished to see. Someone whose voice you wanted to hear. Someone you called, wrote to, or spoke with as soon as the good news settled into you. Perhaps you remember saying, "It happened." Perhaps you remember hearing their joy. Perhaps you remember their words of delight. Perhaps they said, "I knew it would work out." Perhaps they simply smiled, or held your hand, or listened as you tried to explain what still felt almost too peaceful to describe. Let that be part of the memory, if it comes naturally. Remember who was told. Remember the warmth of sharing completion. Remember how reality began to feel more solid once you spoke from the end, instead of from the waiting. Perhaps you said, "Everything has changed now." Perhaps you said, "It is done." Perhaps you said nothing grand, only, "It worked out." But behind the ordinary words was the miracle of inward completion taking visible form. I remember telling them, I remember their happiness for me. I remember how natural it began to feel. Once I spoke of it as fact. Let this memory rest in you. Do not strain to hold it. Allow it to pulse gently, softly, like a lamp in a quiet room. If one detail fades, another may rise. If no detail rises, remain in the feeling. The feeling is enough. Now remember the calm after. This is very important. Do not remain only in the first wave of relief. Let the wave settle. Let yourself move into the still water that follows. The desire has been fulfilled. The message has been delivered. The burden is gone. The turning point has passed. What came after? Perhaps you remember sitting quietly later, that same day. Perhaps you stood near a window. Perhaps you walked slowly through a room. Perhaps you prepared a meal, read a page, folded clothes, washed your hands, stepped outside, or lay down in bed at night with an entirely different feeling in the body. The outer act may have been ordinary, but you were not the same. You had crossed over. Life had changed. And yet, after the first rush, there was a calm, almost sacred normality. Remember that calm. The calm after the answer. The calm after the call. The calm after the restoration. The calm after the money came. The calm after the fear broke. The calm after the door opened. The calm after realizing you no longer had to fight the same battle. Let that calm become your state now. Not urgency, calm completion, fulfillment that has settled into peace. The body rests in it. The breath rests in it. The mind rests in it. There is nothing left to pursue in this moment. Nothing left to ask. Nothing left to solve. You are after, you are beyond, you remember. If your desire concerned love, perhaps you now remember the days after love became secure. You remember no longer wondering. You remember no longer interpreting silence with fear. You remember hearing a familiar voice and feeling only warmth. You remember the calm of being chosen. You remember how naturally affection lived around you. You remember telling someone close to you, quietly, that things had changed. You remember their smile. You remember the peace that followed. Let that love feel ordinary now. Let it feel like part of who you are. I remember when love became real. I remember how peaceful I felt afterward. I remember when I no longer had to chase reassurance. I remember when being chosen became natural. If your desire concerned supply, perhaps you remember the day the financial matter resolved. You remember seeing what you needed to see, hearing what you needed to hear, receiving what you needed to receive. You remember the deep release in the body. You remember telling someone it is taken care of. You remember how your voice sounded different because fear no longer sat behind it. You remember the first evening afterward when you looked around and nothing outside had to shout at you anymore. Peace had entered. I remember when the burden lifted. I remember when provision became visible. I remember how calm I felt afterward. I remember how strange it was to realize I had worried for so long. If your desire concerned a home, perhaps you remember the day the keys were no longer imagined but held. But do not remain there. Go farther. Remember the first calm night after all the movement had ended. Remember lying down beneath that roof. Remember the unfamiliar room already beginning to feel intimate. Remember waking the next morning and realizing this was truly yours. Remember telling someone, I am here now. Remember the quiet pride, the gratitude, the sense of arrival that had softened into belonging. I remember when I came home. I remember the first night of peace there. I remember how natural it became to wake in that place. I remember the relief of belonging. If your desire concerned healing, perhaps you remember the day you first realized the old fear was no longer governing you. Perhaps you remember receiving reassurance. Perhaps you remember noticing strength returning. Perhaps you remember walking, breathing, moving, sleeping, and feeling that the body was no longer the center of worry. You remember telling someone, I feel different now. You remember the tears in their eyes or the quiet relief in your own heart. You remember the calm after, when health began to feel ordinary again. I remember when the body returned to ease. I remember how peaceful I felt afterward. I remember the morning I knew the old fear had ended. I remember how natural well-being became. If your desire concerned success, work, position, or recognition, perhaps you remember the day the opportunity became fact. Perhaps a word came. Perhaps a door opened. Perhaps someone saw in you what you had inwardly accepted. You remember the relief, yes, but now you move beyond the first rush. You remember the days after, when you began to live as the one who had received. You remember the ordinary rhythm of your new life. You remember telling someone close to you and hearing their delight. You remember thinking, this is mine now. This is simply what I do. Let that settled dignity fill you. I remember when the way opened. I remember how quietly confidence grew afterward. I remember when success no longer felt foreign. I remember how natural it became to belong. If your desire concerned emotional freedom, perhaps you remember the day the old wound began to lose its grip. Perhaps there was no announcement, no spectacle. Perhaps one evening you realized the thought that once ruled you had passed through the mind without pain. Perhaps one morning you woke without the same heaviness. Perhaps you told no one, or perhaps you told a trusted friend, I feel free. You remember the calm after. You remember how much space entered your inner world. You remember the lightness of not being captive to the same fear. I remember when the old burden stopped defining me. I remember how peaceful the mind became. I remember the first day I felt truly free. I remember how natural that freedom became. Let whichever memory belongs to you become fuller now, not by strain, but by quiet acceptance. The body continues to rest. The breath continues to deepen. The room continues to fade. The outer world is no longer your task. You are in the fulfilled life. You are remembering from it. The desire has become a completed experience in consciousness. Perhaps you can feel a small smile arise inwardly, not forced, not theatrical, the gentle smile of one who understands. The desire did not need to be chased forever, it needed to be accepted. The waiting did not need to become your identity. You could step beyond it. You could remember fulfillment. You could let the subconscious receive the stamp of completion. Rest in that understanding. Let it become wordless if it wishes. You may no longer hear every sentence distinctly. That is all right. The deeper mind receives more than the surface mind follows. Let the words become softer. Let them drift. Let them mingle with the breath. I remember when it happened. I remember the relief. I remember who I told. I remember how peaceful everything felt afterward. I remember the first calm night after the change. I remember the morning after, when the world seemed gentler. I remember thinking, so it was done all along. I remember how natural fulfillment became. Let the memory repeat, but never hurriedly. Let it return as a wave returns to shore. Each repetition is not effort, it is deepening. Each remembrance does not beg the desire to come. It affirms that consciousness has already taken its place beyond the desire. You are no longer asking, you are recollecting. Now imagine, if it feels right, that you are lying tonight, not in the old state, but after the fulfillment. Perhaps the outward room around you remains the same, yet inwardly you are changed. You know the matter is done. You know the event belongs to your completed experience. You are lying in bed as the one who has already received. How different the darkness feels, how different the pillow feels beneath your head, how different the breath feels entering and leaving the body. Nothing outward need move in this instant for the inner state to be true. The state is chosen, the memory is accepted, the night is receiving it. You are sleeping after it happened, sleeping after the answer, sleeping after the restoration, sleeping after the provision, sleeping after the healing, sleeping after the arrival, sleeping after the turning point. Let that phrase settle so deeply that the body understands it. I sleep after fulfillment. I sleep after the answer. I sleep after the change. I sleep as one who remembers. I sleep as one who has received. The old self who waited is growing faint now. The old self who asked again and again, when, is losing form. The old self who tried to force belief is becoming less important. You are not wrestling that self to the ground. You are simply outgrowing it by dwelling elsewhere. You are dwelling in completion. You are remembering a life beyond waiting. And what you dwell in now becomes the seed of what appears later. The breath is slow. The body is heavy. The room is almost gone. The remembered end is near. Perhaps it is the only thing that still feels clear. It happened. It resolved. It was received. It became natural. Rest there. If the mind tries to ask how, let the question fade before it fully forms. From memory, how is already behind you. If the mind tries to ask when, let it pass into silence. From memory, the event has already entered your experience. If the mind asks whether you are doing this correctly, let even that concern dissolve. You are not performing. You are resting in a chosen fact. The memory need not be perfect. The feeling need not be intense. The image need not be bright. The state only needs to be accepted. And now, accept it softly. The matter is done in consciousness. The desire is remembered. The fulfilled life is entered. The body may sleep. The deeper mind may receive. The bridge may form in silence. Let sleep draw nearer. Do not hold yourself awake to finish anything. If you drift, drift. If the scene blurs, let it blur. If the words become distant, let them become distant. What matters has already been given. The inner fact has been selected. The remembered end has been planted. Still, let these final recollections move through you like a lullaby. I remember when it happened. I remember how I felt. I remember the release. I remember the peace. I remember who shared my joy. I remember the stillness after. I remember how natural the new life became. I remember when waiting ended. I remember when fear loosened. I remember when the future became memory. I remember, I remember, I remember. And now there is less need even for words. The memory is becoming mood. The mood is becoming state. The state is becoming sleep. Sleep is carrying the impression downward, inward, beyond the restless surface, into the silent creative depth where no argument remains. There is only acceptance. There is only fulfillment remembered. There is only the quiet inward certainty that what has been assumed is alive. Rest in it, rest as though the matter is settled. Rest as though the answer has already come. Rest as though you have already crossed the bridge. Rest as though the old waiting belongs to yesterday. Rest as though this is the night after everything changed. And if one final phrase remains before sleep takes you, let it be gentle. I remember it now. I remember it now. I remember it now. It happened. It is done. It is mine in consciousness. And consciousness will make a way.